Okay, so another thing we didn't specifically discuss in episode 1 is how much of the assault, attack, and possibly even death occurred not at the location they were found. And is it possible different individuals were responsible for the initial attack and different individuals were responsible for either the murder or, even if they were already dead, for some kind of mutilation to the body after the fact? Are we dealing with several different suspects here at several different stages of the crime who may or may not even know each other? I mean, there's a lot of problems with this case. So, for the purpose of this episode, we will go into timeline issues regarding the last sightings. So, Jive Puppy, PUPPI.com, has an excellent write up on this. The last sightings of the children. The time approximately 5 to 6:45 p.m. on Wednesday, the 5th of May, 1993. Key people, the victims: Steve Branch, 8 years old, 50 inches tall, 65 pounds, blonde hair, last seen in blue jeans, white t-shirt on a black and red bicycle. Chris Byers, 8 years old, 48 inches, 52 pounds, light brown hair, last seen in blue jeans, dark shoes, white long sleeve t-shirt. Last seen carrying his skateboard. Michael Moore, 8 years old, 49 and a half inches, 55 pounds, brown hair, last seen in blue pants, blue Boy Scouts of America shirt, orange and blue Boy Scout hat on a light green bicycle. Their parents, Melissa John Mark Byers, mother and stepfather of Chris Byers, Pamela and Terry Hobbs, mother and stepfather of Steve Branch, and Dana and Todd Moore, mother and father of Michael Moore. Other key family members: Ryan Clark, 13-year-old brother of Chris Byers, Dawn Moore, 10-year-old sister of Michael Moore. Witnesses in court other than family who described seeing children that afternoon: Narlene Hollingsworth, passerby; Deborah Oettinger, neighbor; and Brian Woody, neighbor. Door-to-door interviews and witness statements: Otto Bailey Jr. and Otto Allen Bailey III, neighbors; Ben Crafton, neighbor; Deborah and Robert Jeff Martins, neighbors; Bobby Posey, neighbor; Christopher Wall, neighbor; and Kim Williams, neighbor. Last seen. The sources for piecing together a narrative of when and where the children were last seen are door-to-door interviews, witness statements, and court testimony. The first of these came as part of the police canvassing the area. Although the police were instructed to make thorough interviews during the door-to-door canvassing, often there were brief notes and many residents were marked simply as not home. Nevertheless, some interviews were substantive. Some of the seemingly more interesting statements in the door-to-door interviews were not followed up with witness statements. The area covered in the canvassing is highlighted in light brown below. The witness statements were fewer in number, and many of the relevant statements were not taken until months after the murders. The court testimony centered around the prosecution's narrative of the events, i.e., the defense did not attempt to introduce an alternative narrative on where the children were last seen. The relevant and uncontroverted background facts are: the three victims went to school that day, getting out at 3 p.m. Steve and Michael owned bicycles, Chris a skateboard. The bicycles would later be found in a bayou not far from where the bodies were found. The skateboard was unaccounted for. And what does that mean to the investigation? The victims' homes, so it was unaccounted for at the time, and it never turned up ever anywhere. And how much effort was put into finding it. The victims' homes are between 3/4 of a mile to 1.25 miles southeast from where the bodies were eventually found. Each of the following sightings took place in the children's neighborhood. This neighborhood is separated by woods and a bayou from where the bodies were found. Chris and Michael lived across the street from each other. These two did not play together often because of a feud between their parents. Let me read that again. These two did not play together often because of a feud between their parents. So how would that impact the case, if at all? Steve's house was 1/4 mile to the south of the other two. Part 1, last seen by family. With the exception of Dana Moore, the other family members of the victims only saw the victims individually or else well before the final sightings by the neighbors. Neighbors filled in more, albeit sometimes contradictory, details on the subsequent whereabouts of the children. Pamela Hobbs, mother of victim Steve Branch, said she was with her son until Michael Moore came by and asked to go out and play with him. This was before 4 p.m., and she warned them to come back before she left for work at 5. Chris Byers dropped by her house briefly, watched some television, and then left. No statement or testimony was taken for the whereabouts of Terry Hobbs, Steve Branch's stepfather, until he is at his wife's workplace at 9:20 p.m., informing her of this disappearance. So, this is kind of weird. So it's unclear here. He was with her son, Michael Moore. This was before 4 p.m. So they left before 4 p.m., at which point did Chris Byers stop by and watch television? Did he do so by himself or with the other boys? I mean, this is poorly phrased here. Ryan Clark, brother of victim Chris Byers, said he was asked to meet his brother and let him into the house at about 3. He never saw him and then had to take off for appearance as a witness in a court case at 4 p.m. He was taken to court by his stepfather, John Mark Byers. He got home at 6 to 6:30 p.m., but by then Chris was missing. So I'm just going to assume here that the court case that he was a witness for had nothing to do with these murders. But I mean, how much has been dug into that? Because you would think, again, I just went over the Evansdale murders. Supposedly there's a lot of court issues in that case as well, because one of the fathers supposedly was going to get some kind of plea deal, and then that's when his daughter disappears. So it's kind of, the fact that there's a court case the same day, I mean, if it's a completely unrelated case, completely not criminal in nature, then of course one could assume it had nothing to do with it, but I haven't seen any more information on this. He got home at 6 to 6:30, but by then Chris was missing. John Mark Byers, referred to as Mark, stepfather of Chris, gave the most detailed accounts of the events of the afternoon. And again, just to interject here, some people suspect the father and stepfather. I mean, there's a lot of theories and speculation and inconsistencies. We went over some of them in episode 1. We'll continue to go over them. His encounters with Chris were few but critical. He said he got home from a medical appointment at about 3:10 and waited for Chris to let Chris into the house because he didn't have a key. Ryan appeared at 3:38. So that's Chris's brother. Mark waited with him until 4 when Mark took Ryan to the courthouse. He stated that he left the courthouse about 5 to go pick up his wife Melissa from her job in Memphis, returning at 5:20. Is everybody keeping all this straight here? He stated he left the lawn chair pushed up against the window and the window in the kitchen pushed in slightly, but a microwave cart had blocked Chris from entering. What? So he put a lawn chair up against the window so that Chris could enter through the window, but a microwave cart was blocking it also? Does this make sense to anybody? And, okay. As Mark took off to pick up Ryan from court, he said he found Chris dangerously skateboarding in the middle of the road about 4 or 5 houses south on 14th. He said he took him home, spanked him, and told him to clean up the carport as punishment. He then took off to pick up Ryan. When Mark and Ryan returned home, Chris was gone. Melissa Byers, mother of Chris, echoed the story of John Mark Byers, although at times it is difficult to separate out what she herself saw and what she was relaying secondhand. She confirmed that Chris was not home when she was brought home. She repeats how he had been skateboarding in the street, although this would probably have been secondhand, and how he was spanked and told to clean up the carport. She adds the detail that he was eating cookies during this time, potentially important for later time of death estimates. Many of the statements of John Mark Byers have been called into question by followers of the case who consider him a suspect. For this time period, Mark's statements concur with his wife's. And also, let's say, again, this is MINDSHOCK, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. I am not alleging anything is true or untrue. I am not alleging anyone is guilty or innocent in any way. If you weren't there, you don't know what happened. We don't hallucinate and pretend on MINDSHOCK. But, theoretically, if Mark was guilty and his wife didn't know, she would obviously still relay the information she thinks is true, which was relayed to her. Okay, continuing on here. Dawn Moore, then 10 years old, is the sister of Michael Moore. When their mother saw Michael heading north on 14th in the direction of Robin Hood Woods, she sent Dawn after him. Although she didn't find him, she related that she saw one white and two black teenagers coming out of Robin Hood Woods. One of them made a suggestion that she interpreted as an offer of drugs. While her statement is not relevant to having seen the victims, it does corroborate the statement of Kim Williams below. Okay, so let's go over this one more time, because we are in a relatively tight timeline here. So, Michael Moore's mother saw him heading north in the direction of Robin Hood Woods. So Dawn's sister, 10 years old, is sent alone after him to find him, and she couldn't find him. But she saw one white and two black teenagers coming out of Robin Hood Woods. Now, do these individuals match the West Memphis 3? Presumably no. Okay. And again, Robin Hood Woods, what we went over in episode 1, supposedly there's drug dealing going on. There's possibly some kind of sexual encounters going on and other illegal activity in Robin Hood Woods. Presumably not a safe place for children. Okay. Among the family members, Dana Moore, mother of Michael, had the final sighting. She said she saw Steve and Michael playing on bicycles shortly after school, and that later she saw the three children heading north on 14th Street. She described having seen her son on a bicycle, Christopher Byers climbing aboard so that the three children were on two bikes. From the Miss Kelly trial, prosecutor John Fogelman, how far down were they from where you were, Dana Moore? Approximately 6 houses. Fogelman, what time of the day was it? Moore, 6 o'clock. 6 houses distant made this sighting at a distance of approximately 120 yards. In another statement, she said she saw them as they rounded the curve, which would have been about 200 yards. Okay, so I don't know. Are some people alleging she didn't see them, but she saw 3 other boys? I mean, so here's another thing, though. How many kids were riding around on bikes at 6 p.m.? I mean, if it's a lot of kids in the neighborhood all the time, okay. If nobody was in the neighborhood and this was verified by all the neighbors, then we have to, again, assume that it was most likely that she did see them. Part 2, last seen as presented in court. The mother of the victims testified in court as to the last time the mothers of the victims testified in court as to the last time they saw their children. Also testifying were 3 area residents. It should be emphasized that the Robin Hood Woods that some say they witnessed the children enter are a different set of woods from where the children's bodies were found. All of these sightings are all over a quarter-mile away and across a bayou from the discovery site. Let me repeat that again. It should be emphasized that the Robin Hood Woods that some say they witnessed the children enter are a different set of woods from where the children's bodies were found. All of these sightings are all over a quarter-mile away and across a bayou from the discovery site. Narlene Hollingsworth, 42 years old, appears again and again in the case. Her nephew was a suspect. She placed one of the convicted, along with Narlene's niece, near the scene of the crime. She also gave an alibi to another of the convicted, which she recanted. Relevant to this topic, she stated she saw the children on East Barton near the school. She said this was at 4:30 in one statement, but then she stated it was 5:30 p.m. at the trial. She said she was driving in the children's neighborhood, leaving off her nephew, L.G. Hollingsworth, also a suspect, when she saw the 3 children on bicycles. She said she almost hit one of the children as he rode out into the street. She was called as a witness in the Eccles-Baldwin trial. Her primary testimony was not recording the timeline for the disappearance of the children. Nevertheless, she was questioned about her encounter with them that afternoon. Wow. The problems with her sighting are several. She said the kids were all on bikes, but they only had two. She said, so did she explicitly state there were three kids on three bikes? And that's what's inaccurate? Or did she, when they say, if you state they were all on bikes, I mean, what does that mean? If two of them are on one bike, the others on the, I mean, I don't know. She said she is certain one of them was wearing shorts and believes the other two were. None were wearing shorts. Again, so how many, again, we have to go back. Is it popular in this area for kids of that age to ride around on bikes? Because if it is, and there's a lot of them riding all over, I mean, this is problematic. Significantly, she didn't mention one was in a Boy Scouts uniform, something that would probably be memorable. That's a good point. She remembered well the dark-haired child who she described as being heavier set than the other two. In reality, the heaviest child was blonde. Perhaps it is telling that she says she stopped her car and told the children they ought to be at home, even though it was only mid-afternoon. What? That's kind of... So how often do adults just randomly stop their car and tell children on bikes, you should be at home, when it's still light out in the middle of the afternoon when children are out playing? I mean, this is the 90s here, early mid-90s. Children are out and about playing in all neighborhoods. This is kind of weird. On the other hand, she did describe the bikes correctly, saying one had some black in it and the other was light green. That's not definitive. There's a lot of bikes like that. As with other neighbors who were witnesses, she described the intentions of the children, how they met up, and where they were planning to go. Like the others, she does not explain how she knew these intentions. Oh, man. This is tough. At trial, she said other family members were in her car at this time. No other family members mentioned this incident in their statements or testimony. Wow. So is she lying about that? And if not, how come it's not corroborated? And again, this is the middle of the afternoon. Did no one else see this interaction? How busy is this neighborhood? With so many errors, why not just dismiss this as a false sighting? And since it is not near the time the children disappeared, why bring this up at all? Narlene did testify in court to this and other matters, and her credibility was key to the prosecution's case. What credibility? I mean, if a family member of hers is a suspect, and her testimony doesn't match up, and her descriptions are all over the place, and nobody can corroborate this interaction, I mean, where's the credibility? Of the key pieces of evidence in the Eccles-Baldwin trial, her accounts were the only ones that were acquired before the arrests. Okay, so I believe now would be a good time for the Major Hollingsworth aside, because a lot of people who followed the West Memphis 3 case, they've never even really heard of the Hollingsworth clan. So also from DrivePuppy.com, let's examine the Hollingsworth clan. So Prosecutor Fogelman said that we've got the Hollingsworth clan who saw Damien and Dominique walking on the service road. This was during the briefing of the victims' families on the evidence. So the Hollingsworth clan, the Hollingsworth were involved in this case in many ways as witnesses to multiple events, as neighbors to both the defendants and the victims, as suspects and as alibis to the defendants, sometimes with a single individual playing multiple roles. I mean, can anybody say conflict of interest here? 3 testified at the trials for the prosecution: Narlene, Tabitha, and Anthony Hollingsworth. Another 6 family members were subpoenaed: LG, Ricky, and Sarah Hollingsworth, Dixie Hufford, and Dean and Dominique Tier. Their convoluted involvement was matched by an intertwining family tree from the Eccles-Baldwin trial. Narlene Hollingsworth: I am L.G. Hollingsworth Jr.'s aunt through marriage. It's just by marriage. Davidson asks, you're his aunt by marriage, but he's your ex-husband's son. Narlene Hollingsworth says, yes, sir, I know it's confusing. Okay, so it's her ex-husband's son. Okay. Davidson asks, you're his aunt by marriage. How did this happen? Judge interjects, is that really relevant? Don't try to sort it out. Well, it might be relevant if there's more conflicts of interest here. Narlene Hollingsworth had married L.G. Hollingsworth Sr. early in life, divorced him, and then married his brother, Ricky Hollingsworth Sr. To further complicate matters, Narlene's sister, Pamela, married into the Hollingsworth family. Dixie Hufford, who would figure prominently in the events, was married to the senior Hollingsworth but divorced out of the family. Dixie was the sister of Deanne Tier, the mother of Domini. Alright, let me go through that one more time. So, Dixie Hufford married the senior Hollingsworth, but divorced out of the family. Dixie was the sister of Deanne Tier, the mother of Domini Tier. Now, for those that don't know, Domini Tier is the ex-girlfriend of Damien Eccles. Okay, so quick write-up on diceytrends.com. So she's currently 44 years old. This is kind of weird. The exact place of birth of Tier is unknown, as she has not disclosed any of that information. Domini Alia Tier now is popular for being the ex-girlfriend of Damien Eccles. Domini was pregnant with their son before her ex-boyfriend was arrested. Their son was born approximately before the trial. After the birth of their son, Domini Tier named him Damien and later explained that the son's name was spelled differently from the father's because the name Damien with an E is based on a biblical character, her son Damian with an A. Domini Tier's ex-boyfriend is now married to Lori Davis, but there is no information regarding her getting married or any relationship. Damien Eccles and his wife met in 1996 after Loris saw his documentary on TV and decided to write him in prison. They began a romantic relationship and the two later got married in December 1999. They wrote to each other over 5,000 letters. Domini's ex-boyfriend was released from prison after evidence supported his innocence in 2011. Domini Tier's account of events that took place. The then pregnant and ex-girlfriend of Damien Eccles gave an account of May 5th that placed her safely off the scene from the horror at moonrise. It's a weird way to say that. Domini, a slender redhead, first was questioned by the police with Jason Baldwin and Eccles the Sunday after the killings in the front yard of the Baldwin trailer. Domini Tier told Shane Griffin and Bill Durham that on May 5th, 93, she, Damien, and Jason Baldwin were at Jason's uncle's house around Dover Road mowing the lawn in the early afternoon. Then she stated she got home around 6 p.m. and was there the rest of the night, verified by her mother, because someone's mother would never lie. Durham reported Damien phoned his father to pick them up at the laundromat at Missouri and North Worthington. They said they were picked up at 6 p.m., and Damien's father took Jason and Dominic home, and Damien went home. Bryn Ridge interviewed Domini at West Memphis Police Department headquarters on May 10th with Mary Margaret Kesterson out of the Arkansas State Police sitting in. Ridge reported Domini claimed that on Wednesday, May 5th, 1993, that she went with Damien Eccles, Jason, and Ken to Jason's uncle's house to watch as Jason mowed his lawn. I mean, is that how exciting things are in that neighborhood? People just go around and watch people mow lawns? Domini Tier and Damien went to the laundry where they called for Damien's mother to pick them up. Domini stated that the time was about dark or just before it got dark. Domini Tier stated that she was dropped off at her house and Damien went home. Domini stated that she called Damien and that he told her he was tired and going to sleep. Domini's mother stated that Domini came in when Time Tracks was on TV on Wednesday evening. That was a good show. Domini stated that on Thursday, she and Damien had an argument and took out stress on each other. Tier claimed that the conflict has to do with Jason Baldwin and his girlfriend. Notes indicated that the mowing was around 5:45 p.m. and that Damien's mother picked them up at around 7:45 to 8 p.m. Also mentioned were teenagers in the local witch cult, Chris, Murray, and Deanna Holcomb. Discrepancies quickly grew in various accounts of the day. For example, police were first told that Damien's father picked them up, then Damien's mother, and finally the whole Eccles family was in the car. Time Track started at 7 p.m. well before dark. Sunset was at 7:49 p.m. In a later statement, Dominique said she got home even earlier, perhaps as early as 5:30 p.m. In later statements, she made no mention of a phone call in which Eccles claimed he was tired and going to sleep. Her description of that conversation is the single instance in which one of the four girls Damien claims he was talking to on the phone actually said they had a phone conversation with Damien in the late afternoon, early evening. So Eccles apparently claimed that he talked to four different girls on the phone, and only one of them corroborated that. I mean, what do the phone records state? Eccles and his family also claimed to have gone to the home of family friends at varying times that evening and afternoon, but well before 8 p.m. Dominique took a nap not long after she got home and then argued with Damien starting around 10 about Baldwin's supposed girlfriend calling Eccles. Police confiscated a notebook from Dominique that contained dark-themed poems with themes of death and suicide, full of typical teenage angst. They were much of a piece with her boyfriend's morbid musings in his Book of Shadows. Tier gave an extensive statement to John Fogelman September 10th under a subpoena. Also in the room were her appointed attorney, Gerald Coleman, her mother, Deanne Tier, and Gary Gitchell of the WMPD. She explained she dropped out in the 10th grade because she was pregnant and described how she had moved around among various local addresses, her father's home in Illinois and California. Fogelman asked Dominique about Jennifer's relationship with Damien. Dominique explained Jason was going out with a girl named Holly, and Holly was Jennifer's best friend. Fogelman says, is that what Damien told you? Dominique responds, yeah. Fogelman asked, do you know Heather? Yeah, that was another one of Jason's girlfriends. How many girlfriends does Jason have? Jason started going out with the Holly girl, and then him and her didn't get along or whatever, and they broke up, and then he started going out with Heather. Holly George had no interest in Baldwin and had never been his girlfriend. Eccles, wait, what? So she was lying about that? How is all this verified? Eccles, 18-year-old prospective father of Dominique's child, was talking on the phone to his other girlfriend, 12-year-old Jennifer Bearden, every day, and was using supposed phone calls from Holly as cover. What? Dominique described her day on May 5th to Fogelman, saying Eccles had not spent the night previously and that a friend of his, Ken, had skipped school and come over at about 7 a.m. They sat around and waited for Jason and Damien. Damien got there around 1, and then me and him and Ken just kind of sat around waiting for Jason to get out of school. Fogelman asks, all right, is this something that y'all had planned before about getting together? Dominique responds, yeah, we had planned it a day before. All right, what had y'all planned on doing? Well, we planned on Jason skipping school and just us hanging around like at the mall and stuff. And Jason went to school that day, so we had to wait for him. She said school got out at 3:15 and Baldwin arrived about 3:25. Though Damien went to Lakeshore virtually every day to see Jason and Dominique, that particular day was somehow different. See, that's another thing too. Whenever something's different, you gotta look at it. It's kind of hard to write it off. They had a plan for May 5th, just as Damien, Jason, and Jesse had a plan. Fogelman states, and after he got there, what did y'all do? Dominique stated, we walked back to Jason's house. She said Jason stopped off at his home before coming to her trailer. His little brothers, Matthew and Terry, were home. And he called his mom, and his mom told him he needed to go over to his uncle's and mow the lawn. So we all got up and we all walked over to his uncle's. Fogelman states, okay, about what time did y'all get to his uncle's? Dominique responds, 4 o'clock, something like that. We walked, on the highway, not on the service road, but on the highway. We walked over the interstate through the Walmart parking lot. We walked around the side of the building towards the back and straight down to his uncle's house on those back streets. It didn't take us very long, about 10 or 15 minutes. Fogelman stated, you got there about 4:15, then what did you do? Dominique responds, Jason mowed the lawn. We sat there for a while watching him mow the lawn, and then me and Damien got up and walked to the laundromat. Damien said he had to call his mom to come pick him up. I don't know, he just called his mom. When they left, Baldwin was still mowing, having circled the yard about 3 times. They left Ken there as well. They sat on the back porch while Baldwin's uncle got the lawnmower out of the shed. They called Eccles' mother at about 5 or 5:30, something like that. And his mother and sister picked him up. After seeming uncertain about whether Joe Hutchinson was there, she said he was driving. Domini stated, they took me home around like 5:45 or 6, in between there. Fogelman asked, do you remember what was on TV when you came in? Domini responds, I didn't look at the TV, I walked the dog, I just came in and sat at the kitchen table for a couple of minutes, then I got bored, then I got up, got the dog's leash, and walked to the store with the dog. The walk was probably about 10 minutes. And here's the other thing, like, which store did she walk to? Can the clerk verify that timeline? Like, why is there so much uncertainty here? Like, wouldn't this be able to be verified? Like, again, if this is just a typical neighborhood, 6 p.m., people are home from work. I mean, nobody saw her. The clerk didn't see her. I mean, come on, where's the verification here? And if they did verify it, why is it not stated everywhere? Okay, the walk was probably about 10 minutes. When she got back, Time Tracks was fixin' to come on, and I took a shower because Mom had told me what happened while Time Tracks ended. Till the end of Time Tracks, she told me what happened. Then I got out of the shower and I laid in bed for a while, and Damien called me, and me and him bickered back and forth for almost an hour, and then she made me get off the phone. What time did he call? About 10. Domini couldn't account for Eccles' whereabouts from about 6 to about 10 p.m. Fogelman asks, what were y'all bickering about? Domini responds, Jason, Jason's girlfriend Holly kept calling Damien, crying about Jason, and I didn't like her calling Damien, crying to him about Jason. Fogelman followed up, okay, I thought that Jason and Holly had already broken up and he was dating Heather. Domini responds, he'd know. He was going out with Holly, and just a little bit before y'all arrested him, he had started going out with Heather. But him and Holly they weren't going out, but they were still seeing each other. Because she was supposed to be breaking up with some other boyfriend while they was trying to go out. Okay, wow. Is everybody keeping up with all these teenage relationships? Fogelman says, okay, and y'all argue about that? Okay, why? Because she was crying to him, and he was like, all poor Holly, and then I come crying to him. It wasn't all poor Holly. It was, he would just get mad because I was having mood swings all the time, and I would just, inaudible, and he got mad about it because he didn't understand. We kept trying to explain to him that I was inaudible to do that, and I got mad because he was sympathizing with Holly, and I didn't want Holly calling him at all. Gitchell asked, how come you weren't together that afternoon? You're usually together all the time. Domini responds, he was just at home. He had to go to the doctor that morning. What? That did not explain why they were not together longer that afternoon. What? Fogelman said, did he spend that night at your house? Domini states, that Wednesday. Fogelman asks, did he? Domini says, no, he didn't spend the night that Wednesday. How about Tuesday? Now, Tuesday, yes. Thursday he spent the night because we got into another argument because of the same people, and I wanted him to spend the night with me that night because you were mad at him. No, we weren't mad at each other. We got back. We were okay after that, but I still wanted him to stay with me. Asked again about Tuesday, she said, yeah, he did spend the night Tuesday because he went home Wednesday morning because he had a doctor's appointment. She said he did not spend the night Friday. Other accounts placed Damien at home on Tuesday. Domini said Damien spent the night on Thursday. Damien has said he did not spend the night at Domini's on May 6th. Okay, so none of these testimonies add up. What the heck? This is all weird. Fogelman backtracked, attempting to clear up confusion about Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. Now, what about Tuesday night? I wasn't clear on that. I thought you said he did, and then I thought you said he didn't, and so I wasn't clear on Tuesday night. Domini responds, oh, Tuesday? Yeah, he did spend the night Tuesday because he went home Wednesday morning because he had a doctor's appointment. Damien would have had to leave very early Wednesday as Ken showed up around 7 a.m. She said Eccles did not spend the night Friday. Instead, I spent the night with him Friday. Asked about being seen by the Hollingsworth family on the service road, she said, we never walked on the service road, ever. See, this is why this case is so tough, because you have all these parties with conflicts of interest. None of these accounts are adding up. I mean, this is just weird. Okay, so she stated, we never walked on the service road ever. Y'all walk on the interstate? Yeah. All right, you were not with him. He has told you that he was with Jason walking around that night. Domini fudged again. I don't know. Number one, he doesn't walk on the service road, whether he's Jason or with me. He just doesn't walk on the service road because it's quicker to go over the interstate. Fogelman states, okay, did he tell you that he went walking with Jason anywhere that night? Domini paused. Fogelman said, you quit looking at me. He didn't tell you that? Domini states, no, he didn't tell me he was walking with Jason anywhere at night, because usually Jason has to be in the house. because Jason's mom is strict about Jason coming in, because usually she's at work and she wants him to take care of his little brother, so usually he doesn't go anywhere at night. Fogelman also asked Deanne Tier, Dominique's mother, on September 10th. Deanne, disabled from a stroke then, has since died. Age 44 and legally separated from her husband, Deanne had lived in Lakeshore since February with her daughter, 6 cats, and a dog in a filthy trailer. She had known Eccles about 2 years and met him when he started going out with Dominique. He lived with them for several weeks, waiting for his parents to come back from Oregon. Huh. Fogelman stated, did Damien ever say anything about why he had left Oregon? Deanne says no. Fogelman asks, he never did tell you anything about that. Deanne stated, he came back to be with Dominique. Fogelman asked, that's what he said? Deanne states yes. Fogelman, okay, did he tell you that? Yeah. Eccles left Oregon after being thrown into a mental institution. That's a statement of fact being stated here, not part of the interview with Deanne. Fogelman stated, after they came back, has he lived with y'all any? Deanne stated, no, sometimes he would come over and they would stay the night, and sometimes she would go over to his parents and stay the night with them. Fogelman states, now in May, first week in May, do you remember Damien coming over any? Deanne states, yes, just about every day. Okay, was it during that first week in May? Would it be morning, afternoon, or would it vary? It would vary. Okay, did Jason ever come over? Deanne states, yes, usually he would be with Damien. Fogelman states, all right, on the first Wednesday in May, it was May the 5th, did Damien come over that day? Yes. She said he came over 1 o'clock, stayed until Jason got out of school. Fogelman stated, Damien didn't go get him or anything, Jason just came over? Yeah, they had already made plans the day before. Okay, so Jason and Damien had already made plans to get together, yeah. Okay, did Damien tell you that? I was usually there when they made the plans because they came over a lot in the afternoon. Again, the plans came up, but it was not clear how a day with plans differed from just about every day. And these comments here are from Gary Meese. Gary Meese, meece.podbean.com, giving the commentary in between the interview quotes here. Deanne said the teenager spent 15 or 20 minutes at her trailer after Jason arrived before they left. Deanne stated, later, Dominique came home. It was still light, and I think it was around 5:30 or 6. She thought she was watching a different world. Fogelman states, okay, earlier, do you remember one of the officers talking to you earlier, like a few days after this happened? Do you remember that? Yes. Officer Ridge, do you remember him? Yes. Let's see, okay, do you remember telling him that Time Tracks was on TV? Deanne stated, well, that was later. That was around 7. Because Dominique took the dog for a walk down to the store, and when she came back, it was around 7 because Time Tracks had just come on. And she took a shower, and I had to tell her the ending of it, because I always watched Time Tracks and Kung Fu. And who can blame her for that? And then what did she do? Deanne stated, she laid down on the bed by me and went to sleep. Fogelman stated, okay, did she talk to anyone on the telephone that night? Yeah, Damien. She said Dominique did not talk to anyone else. Do you remember her talking to Damien? Yes. What time was that? He called around 10 and they talked for an hour because I had to make her get off the phone because they were just arguing back and forth anyway. According to Deanne, Dominique had no contact with Damien from 5:30 to 6 to around 10. Fogelman states, what were they arguing about? Do you know? Deanne states, Jason's girlfriend had called Damien up crying to Damien about Jason. They weren't getting along or had an argument or something. So she called Damien trying to get Damien to talk to Jason for her. Fogelman asked, why would they argue about that? Do you know? Deanne stated, Dominique didn't want Jason's girlfriend calling Damien. Kids get very possessive with each other, and these two were very possessive about each other. Okay, did you know Damien had a bunch of other girlfriends? Not to my knowledge. You didn't know that? No. How about Jennifer, a girl named Jennifer? You didn't know anything about her? Deanne states, Jennifer was Jason's girlfriend. Fogelman stated, Heather was Jason's girlfriend, or Jason had more than one. Deanne stated, I think he had 2 at the time. I'm not sure, but I remember hearing both names. She didn't know who Holly George was and had only heard about Vicky Hutchinson after the case broke. Deanne said Eccles' mother had brought Dominique home in a blue car. She only saw Pam, Damien, and Dominique in the car, not Michelle or Joe as described by others, and not Jason. Fogelman asks, you'd mentioned that Damien and Jason had made plans. What kind of plans had they made? Just that they were going to go get together and do something that evening. Usually they would go over to Walmart and play video games, or go over to Jason's and play video games. They had plans to do something that evening, but Deanne gave no specifics. Fogelman stated, what did you do on May the 4th? What did Dominique do on May the 4th? Well, she was with Damien and Jason. I think they went to play video games that day. Okay, what time did they leave? I don't remember. Okay, was it morning or afternoon? It was usually afternoon when they left. It's weird, so she remembers the exact times of the day in question of the murders, but she doesn't remember the day before. Do you know what time Dominique got home that day? No, I don't remember. It was usually later. How about May the 6th on Thursday? What did Dominique do that day? She was with Damien. Damien came over that day, and he spent the night with us that night. He spent that night Thursday night, yes. And how long was he over that day? Was it all day, or did he come at 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock? Most of the day, I believe. Okay, was he there at lunchtime? Yes. Later, Gitchell asked, how did Damien and your daughter leave on the 5th? Did they go anywhere together on the 5th? That Wednesday? Yeah. They all went over to cut Jason's uncle's yard. And they walked? Yeah. Do you know what time they got back? Around 5:30 or 6. Now, did Damien call Dominique, or did Dominique call Damien? Deanne stated, Damien called Dominique. An affidavit dated May 27, 2008, Dominique Tier, then living in Phoenix, Arizona, stated, on the morning of May 5th, I was at my home in Lakeshore. A friend named Ken came over. Damien, who had a doctor's appointment that morning, arrived at about 1 p.m. Damien, Ken, and I then waited for Jason Baldwin to come over after Jason finished school. Jason arrived at about 3:25 p.m. We then walked over to Jason's home, which was also in the Lakeshore area. Jason's two little brothers, Matthew and Terry, were at his home. Jason called his mother and was told that he had to go to his uncle's to mow the lawn. We then walked over to the home of Jason's uncle. We arrived there at about 4 p.m. We watched Jason mow his uncle's lawn. Later, Damien and I walked to the nearby laundromat and called Damien's mother. His father, mother, and sisters then arrived in the car to pick us up. They then dropped me off at my home. I walked the dog and took a shower. After I laid down for a while, Damien called me at about 10 p.m. and we bickered back and forth on the phone for nearly an hour. I was upset because Holly, an ex-girlfriend of Jason, kept calling Damien to discuss her problems with Jason, and I didn't like that. The 2008 statement offered no alibi for Eccles and threw his sisters into the family car. Eccles had only one sister, Michelle. Dominique's story otherwise varied little from 1993. Huh. That's weird. Sisters. Was that like a typo, or she misspoke, or did she really not know that her boyfriend at the time and the father of her child, who she was super serious about, didn't how many sisters he had? Okay. Dominique was able to testify for the defense but was not called. While roughly consistent, her statements offer discrepancies such as times and who picked them up at the laundromat. In a phone interview October 2016, Dominique Ferris said she was agreeing to talk because it's all over now, it was a long time ago. She was polite and friendly and quick to answer questions with no hesitation, in a voice still high-pitched and soft. Dominique deliberately had withdrawn from any public presence in the case because quote, because it just seemed like it interfered in my life, just because it had put itself in the middle of my life. I did not want to put my life in the middle of it. She last talked to Eccles 2 days after he got out. Hope to see you. I'm fine. That's all that was. Dominique said she took their son, Seth. Wait, what? So she changed his name? There's how many sons? To visit his father in prison from time to time until Lori Davis moved to Arkansas. The visit stopped because of Davis, who eventually married Damien. I don't trust her. She just shows up from out of the blue from New York or wherever she came from. Seth still does not talk with Damien. My son tried to, talk to him. Damien just, kind of blew him off. So we're just letting sleeping dogs lie there. Dominique acknowledged about Eccles, he's weird. He's all into this weird magical BS stuff. I never had any interest in that. She saw little interest from Jason in magic, but she had not known him well. Not really, we didn't get along. I didn't like him and he didn't like me. He came over to my house sometimes with Damien, or I went over to his with Damien, but I didn't have much to do with Jason. She remembered Jesse as weird. Looking back on the investigation, trial, and incarceration of her child's father, she said, we would never want anyone to go through that situation. I wouldn't want to go through it again. Ever. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I wouldn't want it on my now 16-year-old girl. I keep trying to keep them sheltered because of all that happened there. It changed the way I look at cops and how I view detectives and everything. It just wasn't right. It's botched, every bit of it, every bit. They probably handled that about as bad as they handled Jean Benet. Asked if she had any idea on who committed the crimes, she said, I guess I do have a lot of them. From just some random bum to maybe the parents who were involved in a bad drug deal to just somebody that nobody knows anything about. She had no doubts about the innocence of the West Memphis Three. No matter how weird Damien is, no matter how weird Jesse is, they would never do this. No way. They were the scapegoats no matter what. And this is from Gary Meese's Blood on Black, The Case Against the West Memphis Three, Volume 1. Okay. Wow. Okay. So, that's the background on Domini, and now going back to the Hollingsworth clan here. Now that we have these relationships sort of figured out, I mean, here's a chart, okay? I mean, even with the chart, it's kind of tough here. It's kind of tough. I mean, yeah. Okay. Narlene's Day. So May 5th began for Narlene Hollingsworth when she took her children to school and then picked up her nephew, L.G. Hollingsworth Jr., to help him job hunt. And he is 17 years old at the time, in 1993. LG soon found a job at the Big Star store. At approximately noon, they had a car accident. Narlene spent the early afternoon at the insurance company. Afterwards, she returned home bringing LG along. Narlene lived near Dominique Tier and Jason Baldwin. And LG claimed to visit Damien at Dominique's trailer earlier in the afternoon and later saw Damien in Lakeshore near 5 p.m. Narlene, accompanied by her family, then returned LG to his home in the neighborhood of the victims. After leaving off LG, Narlene said she encountered the victims on Barton in front of their school. As with each encounter that day, her memory was vivid and specific. Narlene testified her son Ricky's girlfriend Sombra and all of her children except Anthony were in the car with her when this occurred. No substantiating statements were taken. Okay, so they might have been. So they just simply weren't asked. Okay, wow. It's also curious, too, because Barton is on the complete other side of the neighborhood to Robin Hood Hills. Narlene stated this, well, I saw 3 bicycles. Okay, so that's a problem. I saw one little heavyset boy on a red one with black on it on the side. He's the one I almost ran over. I liked to hit him. What? Oh no, you can't forget that day. Anyway, when I was going down that road, the little boy was just whipped right out in front of me. He was in a big hurry to get somewhere. And the other little boy in the other bicycle was a little blonde-headed boy with his little hair sticking up. And Sombra raised up in the back seat and said, oh, I know them. I said, you don't know them. They live over here and we way over there. Now sit down before you get me a ticket and put your seatbelt on. She said, no, I really do. That's Steve Branch. I play with him every day all the time I see him. My mama knows him. I said, well, sit down for right now and let's get home. I said, I done had a rough day and I'm ready to go home. This was 10 minutes after 5. That's curious. In her statement to police, she provided even more details. Okay, there were 2 smaller boys and a little heavyset boy, a little heavier than the rest of them, and the little heavyset boy had a bit darker hair than the rest of them. If I am not mistaken, the little heavyset boy had on a pair of green shorts with some black in it, with black and white tennis shoes on. But I think all 3 were wearing shorts. But I am not really sure about the other 2 because I got a good look at the little dark-headed boy. That's the one I can describe better than the rest. And this was the May 10th, 1993 interview. Note, these clothes did not match the missing person reports or the clothes found at the crime scene. She also recalled the conversation she had with them, and I told them little boys, you ought to go home, and that little boy said, no, we're going to play for a little while. Okay. Narlene provided a letter to Miss Kelly's defense team saying she encountered Miss Kelly that night at 6:30 p.m. Okay, so she's just encountering everybody. Hold on a second. Let me do a population check. So the West Memphis population in 1990 was 28,463 people. That's a lot of people. Okay, so she keeps so wow. I mean, obviously this specific neighborhood would have less people, but we're still dealing. This is not a tiny little hamlet in the middle of nowhere where there's only like 100 people in town. So that she's claiming to have seen all of these people, I mean, that's a little tough. But let's continue here. So she encountered Miss Kelly that night, 6:30 p.m. This made her an alibi witness at a crucial moment. Because of this statement, she was not a witness in the Miss Kelly trial. She was, however, confronted about this letter in the Eccles-Baldwin trial during cross-examination by defense attorney Scott Davidson. Davidson asked, after seeing the boys over by Weaver, did you then go over, do you know where Highland Trailer Court is? Yes, sir, I do. And did you go over there? Yes, sir, I did. And what were you doing over there? Well, my daughter and her husband was into it. She kept saying she wanted to move, and she asked me earlier that day, would I go over there and check on a place to live for her and talk to a man named David Dees that rents out mobile homes. And I told her if I had the time I would. I figured if I could do all that stuff for everybody all day, I could do something for her. But you know what's weird though? So she had a car accident, and this is a busy day for her. She had a car accident earlier in the day. She spent the day at the insurance company, whatever. Then she's giving all these people rides, and she's even specifically telling them that she wants to get home because she had a long, hard day. Now, all of a sudden, she's going back out at night? I mean, maybe, but it's kind of weird here. And I figured out if I could do all that stuff for everybody that day, I could do something for her. Judge Burnett asks, where in the hell are we getting at? I mean, is that a common statement for a judge to interject? Davidson states she saw Miss Kelly there at 6:30. Since Miss Kelly was not at trial, an issue was made of the relevancy. The defense argued that Miss Kelly was a potential witness, and this would impeach his credibility. The testimony proceeded, but Narlene declared it was all a mistake. Davidson said, and then you were over there at Highland Trailer Park. Did you witness, or were you there with a group of people out there? No, sir. Did you see Jesse Miss Kelly that day? No, sir. Not that day. I saw him Thursday. After I thought about each day and what I did on those days, I realized, and the children refreshed my memory too by saying, Mother, that was Thursday that we saw him. Wait a second. So she said she was alone. Now she's stating her children saw him, that they saw Miss Kelly on the next day. Wow, is everybody keeping track of all this? I mean, this case is really weird. Nobody can corroborate anything, and there's discrepancies everywhere about everything. Although now of less consequence, Narlene went on to recount the conversation she had with Jesse. Yes, sir, I was thinking there for a little while. I saw him that Wednesday, but I remembered I went back over there on Thursday. Wait, she went back over there on Thursday? So she was there on Wednesday and Thursday? And it was Thursday when I saw him. So she was there Wednesday, but she didn't see him. Then she was there Thursday and she saw him. And I hollered at him 3 times before he turned around and answered me. I said, Jesse, are you mad at me? He said, no, ma'am, I could never be mad at you. Davidson said, okay. Narlene said, I just didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Like, what's her relationship with Miss Kelly as well? Although she stated she was in the car with her children during this encounter, there were no statements substantiating or contradicting this time of event from other witnesses. So they never bothered to corroborate anything she said about anything, whether with Miss Kelly or with supposedly encountering the boys by the elementary school. Narlene went on she was told at 6:30 p.m. by Sheila Joy about the 3 missing children, although this was well before their disappearances had been reported. What? So someone told her? Sheila Joy told her at 6:30 that there were 3 missing children, but this was before the report. Okay. Narlene's night. Narlene's encounters with the children and Miss Kelly were uncorroborated. This was not the case for her next encounter. Sometime after 9 p.m. on the evening of the 5th, Narlene's aunt, Dixie Hufford, called and asked to be picked up from her workplace, a laundromat on Ingram, about a half-mile east of the neighborhood where the victims lived. The Hollingsworth family crowded into their 1982 Ford Escort wagon. Who exactly was in the car would vary slightly from account to account. All agreed on the presence of Narlene, her husband Ricky, their sons Anthony and Ricky Jr., and their daughters Tabitha Hollingsworth and Mary. Anthony and Narlene also included Sombra, the girlfriend of little Ricky. Tabitha placed L.G. Hollingsworth in the car. Little Ricky, Mary, and Sombra were not interviewed, and LG gave other whereabouts for himself. Wow, is anybody having a Maxwell moment right now? This is hard to keep track of. Narlene, Anthony, and Tabitha told the same basic story as to what they saw. While traveling east on the South Service Road as they were passing Love's Truck Stop, it's a great name, and before the Blue Beacon, they said they saw Damon Eccles and Dominique Tier walking along the roadside. So this is supposedly after 9 p.m. Now, we have Dominique and her mother's own accounts that she was at home watching time tracks. Great show. I mean, who would want to miss time tracks? But according to these people, they saw Dominique and Damien Eccles walking on the roadside. They both wore black. Dominique, Narlene's niece, so this is not someone not known to them. So Dominique is Narlene's niece, had on black jeans with white flowers. The prosecution would present a case they mistook Jason for Dominique. Does Jason really look like Dominique? These differed, maybe at a distance at night. Do they have the same frame? And they wear the same clothes? These differed from the clothes Miss Kelly said Jason wore, but is in agreement for what Damien wore. They were both muddy. What? They were both muddy? What? Okay. Wow. Tabitha testified to this sighting at the Miss Kelly trial. Anthony and Narlene testified at the Eccles-Baldwin trial. Tabitha testified it was about 9:30 p.m. and in her note to police said 9:15 or 9:30. Narlene was precise about the time. This was exactly 20 minutes till 10. Exactly. Because we had our watches and we knew what time it was. But what's weird, though, do they always check the time when they see people walking on the road? Like they saw, allegedly they see Damien and Dominique, and do they immediately check their time? Like how often do they check their watch? Like every 2 seconds, so they always know exactly what time it is? Okay. And this was from Narlene Hollingsworth's interview May 10th, 1993. The others were less certain, with Anthony stating it may have been an hour later. What? So after 10? Anthony also had a problem with the date. Not just the time, but the date. You can't make this stuff up. This is just weird. So Davidson stated, when did you say you went and talked to police about this? Anthony stated, very next day. Did they write anything and have you sign it that day? Yes, sir. The very next day? Yes, sir. Okay, so May the 6th, you talked to Gary Gitchell about this? Yes, sir. And gave him a statement? I ain't give him a statement till May the 7th, I think. This was from the Eccles-Baldwin trial. After being presented, that's still a few days after, so, we're not talking months later like in these other cases, but, yeah, make of that what you will. After being presented with his signed statement dated May 25th, 1993, Anthony changed his time frame. So he can't even remember when he talked to the police. That's not necessarily suspicious, though, because, that's not really relevant to anything, which day he talked to them, is it? Like, he described what he said he saw, but if his memory is that bad. So Davidson stated, May the 25th is when you talked to him. Yes. So it wasn't the next day. No, sorry about that. Make of that what you will. Narlene testified immediately following Anthony Hollingsworth. Perhaps to prevent a similar embarrassment at the end of his discreet examination, Fogelman presented her with the date she made her statement. Fogelman stated, all right, and did you give a tape-recorded statement to them? Yes, I did. All right, and was that on May the 10th? I think it was. Okay, let me show you this and see if it refreshes your memory. Does that refresh your memory? Is that when it was? It sure was. Fogelman stated, I don't have any further questions. So even with this refresher, Narlene seemed confused as to the date during cross-examination. Davidson stated, do you recall when those statements were? Narlene stated, well, I know it was on a Friday about I told them, but I gave statements probably around the 9th or 10th. Mr. Fogelman stated, Friday was the 7th of May. Oh, man. Okay, so nobody can remember anything. In a newspaper interview, Narlene and Tabitha said they spoke to the police 2 days after the murders, although Tabitha Hollingsworth's statement was dated the 20th. Narlene Hollingsworth said that her 16-year-old daughter Tabitha said they told police 2 days after the murders that they saw Tier and Eccles walking down a service road along I-40 around the time of the murders. And this is from the Memphis Commercial Appeal, September 28th, 1993. And so Domini claimed that they never used the service road, that they always used the highway. But whatever, make of that what you will. Now, if they never used the service road until that particular night, and if they really were muddy, now, even if they were muddy, that doesn't prove they killed anybody. Like, how often were they muddy? Now, if they were never muddy, I mean, and that was the only day they were ever muddy ever, I mean, we really need some controls here. We need interviews with people who had seen them in the neighborhood, walking around, walking on different roads. Had they ever seen them muddy ever before? If that was the only time anybody has ever seen them muddy, okay, I mean, that's still relatively circumstantial, but that's a little bit more damning than if they were frequently muddy. So here we have an image looking east from Love's convenience store. This yellow line segment represents the approximate area where the Hollingsworth said they saw Damien and Domini. Now again, if they saw them on a different day, what does that prove? And this truck stop also is supposedly the site of some nefarious activity. We won't be diving into that for this episode, but we'll get to it in future episodes. Continuing on here, Ricky Hollingsworth Sr. rode shotgun and was in the best position to identify the pair of walkers. When asked whether Ricky and the children had seen Damien and Domini, Narlene said, "Yes, ain't no way they missed that." And that's Narlene Hollingsworth, May 10th, 1993. Ricky said he only saw two people but couldn't say who. Narlene gave a possible reason for his reluctance to identify them. He sure is scared. He's scared somebody is going to kill him. By the time he gave his statement to the police in December 1993, Ricky had divorced Narlene. The testimony that Damien and Domini were present on this service road a short distance from where the bodies were found presented a problem for the prosecution. Domini was not being presented as part of the crime. The prosecutor put forth that the Hollingsworth mistook Jason for Domini, even though as a relative they had known Domini for her whole life. Narlene was adamant about who she saw. "I wouldn't change my story if I was dying." Narlene's got certain turns of phrases and speeches here that are quite interesting. So here's the thing, though. So Jason did have long hair, and he looked relatively slim as well. I suppose at night in the dark, I mean, it's not the most outlandish unless they distinctly saw faces or possibly if there was some kind of reflection of light from the headlights for the hair color, for exact hair color or whatever, or exact hairstyle. Because they're obviously not dead ringers for each other, but from a distance at night, it'd be a lot harder for her to, for them to mistake someone else. But so Hollingsworth, who was a resident of Lakeshore Estates trailer park, "I know that freckled-faced, red-headed girl anywhere. It was Domini, not a boy." So did she okay, so if she clearly saw her face, I mean, okay. I mean, if this is not an ID from a distance of shadows, she's stating she clearly saw her face. And this was the Memphis Commercial Appeal, September 28th, 1993. Defense attorney Phil Ford protested the claim of misidentification. Ford stated, "Your Honor, we're asking for that instruction. This witness identified Damien and Domini at the roadside. There is no testimony whatsoever from either of these last two witnesses that Jason was there. And you know good and well that the state is going to argue that she's wrong and she's really seeing Jason, and that's speculation." Burnett stated, "I don't know, I'm just saying that." Ford interjects, "Just junk, and what you're doing, Judge, is you're allowing them to do that. When this witness says, no, it's Domini, and we're asking that you give an instruction that this applies only to Damien since Jason has not been mentioned." Burnett states, "Well, do you have other evidence that's going to suggest that Jason could have been there and that she was mistaken?" Fogelman stated, "Your Honor, we're going to have other evidence that Jason had shoulder length and that he was 5'8", weighed about 112 at the time." Okay, so I couldn't find Domini Tier's height anywhere. But here's a photo of Damien and Domini. Now, Damien is 5'8", or supposedly was 5'8" at the time. He's also listed as 5'9" in other areas. So he's between 5'8" and 5'9". And Jason Baldwin, according to his arrest record, is 5'10", 130 pounds. What's kind of weird, though, that's from an arrest in 92. Wow, this is weird. He's listed as 5'8" here. Okay. 5'8". Actually, Eccles' arrest report here states he's 5'11", 160 pounds. So either way, these guys are anywhere between 5'8", 5'11". In this image with Damien and Dominique, you can clearly see that he's a good half foot at least taller than her, not to mention she's standing even closer to the camera, which would make her appear to be even taller than she is. So we can't mistake the heights here. Just their height alone would be... It's kind of unlikely that they would be mistaken. Just the heights are just too different. Even though Jason does look pretty skinny as well, he's just a lot taller. Ford states, Your Honor, that they're trying to say that. That's crazy, Your Honor. That's crazy doing. I renew my motion for severance. Burnett denied. Okay. The Supreme Court of Arkansas referenced this citing in detailing substantial evidence against Eccles. This evidence placed Eccles in dirty clothes near the scene at a time close to the murders. Although not material to this point, other evidence established that Dominique Tier might have been confused with Baldwin, as both had long hair and were of slight build. But not the same height, though. Baldwin's attorneys did not appeal based on lack of substantial evidence. Narlene's credibility was brought into question from several sources. The notes from the interview with her aunt Dixie Hufford said that Narlene will exaggerate. Her brother-in-law, John Hollingsworth, was blunter, claiming she was only interested in reward money. Quote, I can understand them checking into all these leads, but if they're listening to Narlene Hollingsworth, he's wasting his time. End quote. This was Blood of Innocence, page 125. Private investigator Ron Lax quoted her as saying she was born to know things. Davidson tried to use this to impeach her testimony at trial. Davidson, have you made statements that you were born to know things and that you knew that something was wrong after? Narlene stated, well, I knew something was wrong because I knew that children were missing earlier. So what is this, just a bad feeling? Her bad feeling was acute. Davidson stated, okay, was there another reason you felt like you ought to stop? Narlene said, yes, sir. Narlene said, I was getting sick. Why were you getting sick? I don't know. You don't know? No, sir. I just started feeling like all of a sudden I wanted to throw up. Felt like you wanted to throw up? Yes, sir. And is this when you passed them? Yes, sir. I passed them and got down the street and tried to stop where I could throw up. And you stopped to throw up? I stopped for a second and then went on because they kept hollering. The kids kept hollering. Let's go on, let's go. You can get sick when we get there. What? The defense attacked her credibility by suggesting that she might lie because her nephew was a suspect. Davidson stated, goes to credibility, Your Honor. He's some type of relation. Although this line of questioning was dropped, Narlene had no hesitancy to implicate her nephew during her police interview. This is weird. Quote, I don't know what LG is capable of. I'm not saying that he would do it. I am not saying that he wouldn't. But I know Damien. Everybody said that Damien. I know that he's supposed to have 666 on his shoes. Well, only one thing. The day I run into LG, the day of the police department, he begged me to go in there and sit down with his mother and I said I can't do that. He said that I ain't no laundromat Wednesday night. I said, yes, you was. He said, no, I wasn't. And go and there and tell them that I wasn't. I said, no, I won't. Because you was up there at the laundromat. He said, no, I wasn't. I said, yes, you was. Because Ricky Hollingsworth said that I had just missed you. Narlene Hollingsworth, May 10th, 1993. Notes, the last comment is odd since Ricky Hollingsworth was supposed to have arrived with Narlene. When Narlene repeats the above assertion the second time, the transcription reads, he said you go in there and tell them that you are mommy. And I said, no, I won't. What? Her son and fellow witness for the prosecution, Anthony Hollingsworth, had been arrested for unlawful carnal knowledge with a minor. The defense attempted to bring this out, possibly as another reason why Narlene might want to point to someone else as the killer. David stated, okay, does Anthony live with ya? Narlene said, yes, he lives on my land. On your land? Yes, sir. He lives out in the yard? Well, I wouldn't say that. He lives in a camper. Okay. He eats with me, but he stays in the camper? He has to. He has to? Why does he have to? Fogelman stated, Your Honor. Narlene stated, sir, I don't really want to answer that. Fogelman stated, don't see what this has anything to do. And then Burnett said, I'm having a little bit of trouble following your line of thought as far as what is relevant. Narlene stated, well, he didn't kill nobody. Judge Burnett offered the prosecution the grounds for objection. Are you objecting to relevancy? Fogelman said, I'm objecting to the relevancy. Burnett said, sustained. Anthony Hollingsworth is now on the Arkansas sex offenders list. So some more curiosities here. On the commercial appeal, January 31st, 1994, L.G. Hollingsworth stated, I was not a suspect. When the police, talked to me, I told them I was happy to help them all I could. The prosecutor, Fogelman, all right, tell me about the box in your car. LG stated, no, it's Richard's car. All right, tell me about the box. This is from the LG Hollingsworth interview, September 2nd, 1993. LG and the stinky box. This is also a write-up from jivepuppy.com. This isn't the name of a fairy tale for dysfunctional families. Along with Mr. Bojangles and the Tattooed Man, the stinky box has become a legend in this case. L.G. Hollingsworth Jr., 17 years old, in 1993, was the son of L.G. and Linda Gale Hollingsworth. He was the nephew of Narlene Hollingsworth. His initials were not abbreviation, but his name. He gave L.G. another meaning. He had Little Gangster tattooed on his bicep, and that's gangster with a T-E-R at the end, not an A or an A-H. He lived in the neighborhood of the victims, nearby the Garners on Holiday Circle, where Mark Byers said he first went to search for Chris on the night of the disappearance. A ninth-grade dropout, he spent the day of the 5th looking for a job, finding one at the Big Star grocery store as a bagger. He was friends of Damien Echols. He dated Lisa McDaniels, described as Dominique's best friend. Oh wow, the plot thickened. Although she moved out of town just prior to the murders. So Lisa McDaniels moved out of town just before the murder. Okay, interesting. So this guy dated Dominique's best friend and was friends with Damien Echols. In Damien's May 10th interview, he described LG as weird. He had a falling out with LG after LG suggested they swap girlfriends. Blood of the Innocents, page 120. Although this would have been for his cousin Dominique. What? So Dominique is his cousin and he wants to swap girlfriends with? Or is this one of Damien's other girlfriends? Because supposedly if Damien had many. Damien pointed at LG as someone who could have killed the children. That's interesting. When he saw Echols being taken into custody, LG said he was the next one they were going to arrest. Is it curious that he doesn't state, oh, they got the right guy, case closed, but he thinks he himself is going to be arrested next. Unless if he did see it as some kind of a witch hunt of like goth type kids. LG was the target of several tips, although the most incriminating could not be confirmed. In one taken by Detective Mike Allen, the tipster said, quote, she had overheard that a Dominic and a Damien killed the 3 little boys, and that LG, last name unknown, took and laundered their clothing. So not the little boys' clothing, but the dirty clothing of the perpetrators. Caller stated that Damien had body parts in a box from the children. This is Blood of Innocence, page 121. That's kind of a random thing for the caller to say, though, and how did they know that? Are these recorded? So on these tip lines, are these voices recorded? Can they identify these callers? Or do they know who the callers are and maybe they found them not credible? Another tip came from someone who claimed LG's aunt, Dixie Hufford, had said 2 boys and a girl went to the laundromat on Ingram on May 5th between 10 and 10:30 p.m. to clean up. They had mud and blood on their clothes. Dixie was related to one of them, Hollingsworth. So did all 3 have mud and blood? Because according to the other tip, LG was the one who washed their clothes, not necessarily involved in the crime. Is this other tip stating that both the boys, Damien and LG, had blood and mud as well as the girl? So this is a tip from someone identified as Boone, May 20th, 1993. LG stated he borrowed the car of his friend Richard Simpson and went to the Flash Market laundromat to get Dominique's phone number from his Aunt Dixie. And why would he need that? His Aunt Dixie confirmed that he came by for Dominique's number wanting to call her to talk about a fight she had with Damien. Okay, so now we have yet another party involved with her fight about girlfriends and boyfriends. Dixie recalled he wore a white shirt and a tie. She said he knew Simpson's car and LG had used a different one. Okay, so Dixie is stating that he did not use Simpson's car, but he used somebody else's car, whereas LG is claiming he used Simpson's car. Wow, okay. So again, just a case of nothing being able to be corroborated by anybody. Another tip dated May 11th came from the teacher of LG's Mississippi cousin. The teacher stated 8-year-old Sarah Hollingsworth said she overheard that LG had come home with blood on him and clothes, and he was carrying something in a box in his car. When the police finally followed up on this lead in the middle of June, so the tip came in May 11th, completely ignored until mid-June. Sarah Hollingsworth denied she had said this. This is in the commercial appeal, May 10th, 1994. Wow. Okay, so the cousin, LG's Mississippi cousin, the teacher of the cousin. So the teacher stated 8-year-old... So to whom? Is the teacher claiming that Sarah Hollingsworth told the teacher... told them that Sarah had said this? Interesting. It's brain fingerprint scans, come on. His Aunt Narlene said LG appeared in the Lakeshore neighborhood the evening of the day the victims were discovered. She said her family members told her, so more than one family member, that LG had a box with something smelly inside, and he threatened the children if they touched the box. Don't touch it, don't step on it, or I'll hurt you. This is from Narlene Hollingsworth, May 10th, 1993 interview. Narlene stated, the thing that is bothering me is them coming down the street with that box they claim LG had, and they didn't want to open it. And Detective Dabbs stated, but you said it smelled horrible. Like the incriminating tips, nothing could be nailed down about the box. When confronted about its contents, LG told Fogelman it had nothing more than test papers from a Vo-Tech school. Okay, so LG admitted that he had a box. So he's admitting that a box exists. So he's claiming that the box had test papers. How many people carry this kind of box with test papers? I mean, would they be in a folder? I mean, how many people carry test papers in a box? I mean, I don't know. The muddled timeline. Narlene gave a detailed account of her day. She described taking LG to look for a job in the morning, having an accident around noon, returning LG to his home around 5 p.m., encountering the victims, and then later encountering Damien and Dominique along the South Service Road. And also possibly Miss Kelly, although she switched that to a different day. I mean, she's busy. LG filled in a few more details, although his description is sometimes self-contradictory. He described finding a job in the morning, going to a Sonic fast food restaurant for lunch, trying to go home but needing a key after lunch. I mean, so nobody has keys to their homes in this area. At this time, Narlene and LG went to his mother's work at a nursing home in the south part of town but had an accident along the way. They next went to the insurance company sometime after that, to Narlene's place in Lakeshore. LG says he then went to visit Dominique's place about 1. This encounter would seem to have to be later, considering all that occurred. Deantier said that he came over at about 11 a.m. Oh, man. So everybody's all over the place with their times. He stayed at Lakeshore until about 5 p.m., seeing Damien there just before he left. Then Narlene took him to his house. Wow. Okay. In notes from his May 26 statement, he said he was at the Simpsons house from 5:30 to 9:30. In undated notes, it says he went to the laundromat at 10 p.m. His most extensive interview took place early in September. In September, LG was under house arrest, offense unspecified. In this statement, he says after Narlene took him home, he encountered his mother and a friend of hers. They soon left together to her friend's house. In the same statement, he said he went home and stayed there until his mother arrived at 7:30 or 8:30 p.m. So he's giving a lot of conflicting statements here. In another contradiction in the same statement, he said that he went to his friend Richard Simpson's house. Richard was tripping out or something. This is from Hollingsworth interview, September 2nd, 1993. So why was he tripping out? LG said he stayed there until he went to the Flash Market Laundry. Simpson at first confirmed LG was there, and then he said LG was not there, and he had asked him to lie. What? We're 2 days being confused. When did LG get his job at the Big Star? This event helped define the day for LG and Narlene Hollingsworth. They both agreed they were there the rest of the afternoon until 5 p.m., but Narlene also describes taking LG to and from work the next day. Because they were all gathered up there and I didn't know what was going on, so I went down there and LG was saying, "Get me to work." So anyway, I went on and got him to work, so then later on that day, he got off early. I know he came to my house about 2:40 or 2:45, and I thought that he would be working a little later than that on Wednesday. This is from Narlene Hollingsworth interview, May 10th, 1993. Anthony Hollingsworth referred to Wednesday as though LG already had the job. LG was supposed to work at Big Star that night. From Police Notes, Anthony Hollingsworth interview, May 26, 1993. As has been noted, both Narlene and Anthony had no problems. As had been noted, both Narlene and Anthony had problems defining the day they saw Damien and Domini, at least in relation to when they gave their statements to police. Wow. Also, items confiscated from LG Hollingsworth, May 10th, 93, a knife and 4 pairs of tennis shoes. So a knife and a sheath and 4 pairs of tennis shoes. Wow. Okay. Richard Simpson and the Hungarian architect. One of the prime reasons LG aroused suspicion in this case are the contradictory statements from him and his alibis. Richard Simpson worked for the city of West Memphis as a building inspector. At 49, he spent his free time as a non-denominational preacher. He said he met LG through his ministry. LG spent a lot of time with Simpson. At the time of his September statement to police, LG had moved out of his parents' house and was temporarily staying with Simpson. Does anybody find that strange? Simpson's relation with LG raised the suspicions of the police. On the weekend after the murders, they went to Memphis together with Simpson buying drinks for the underage LG. When Simpson was brought in to talk with the police on May 13th, he told them LG was at his place on the night of the 5th. Shortly after that interview, Simpson and LG took a trip to Princeton, Kentucky. They rented 2 rooms in a motel, and LG met up with his girlfriend who had recently moved there. His girlfriend's uncle... So is this the same girlfriend that was best friends with Domini? His girlfriend's uncle and aunt called the police on the underage pair. Sheriff Jim Dora intervened, and soon LG was brought back to West Memphis. So this is somebody else, maybe? Richard Simpson came in for a second interview with the police. This time, Simpson was polygraphed about LG's alibi. He failed the polygraph, and then told police that LG had asked him to lie. LG had not been at his home that night. The news story was that LG had come over Thursday, and they were together through the weekend. As presented by Fogelman, LG Hollingsworth statement, September 2nd, 1993. Wow. Is everybody still keeping track of all this? I mean, this is bizarre. This is all very mind-shocking. At the time of the murders, Richard Simpson was hosting a visit from the Hungarian architect Laszlo Benyo. Benyo was in America for 7 weeks as part of a Soros Foundation program that enabled him to learn American culture and architectural traditions. I mean, what? So he was also hosting this Hungarian architect and LG, this lowly criminal. I mean, what is going on here? What the heck is going on in West Memphis with these individuals? And, I mean, this is just crazy, all these intertwined individuals. So the Soros Foundation here on jivepuppy.com is spelled S-O-R-O-W-S. But I actually can't find that. There's no record of that on Google. So are they talking about George Soros's foundation, in which case that's going to open up a whole lot of rabbit holes that I don't feel like going down right now. Anyway, continuing on here, when asked, so according to police notes, when asked about the date of Wednesday, May 5th, 1993, he, Laszlo Benyo, stated that he was living with Richard Simpson during this time and that he is certain that he was at home during that evening. He knows LG and another young black male who used to come over. He didn't remember LG coming over that Wednesday. He stated again, LG didn't come over. This is from Detective Ridge Notes, Laszlo Benyo, May 27th, 1993. Also keep in mind, Dawn Moore, Michael Moore's 10-year-old sister who was sent by their mother in the direction of Robin Hood Woods, said that she saw one white and two black teenagers coming out of Robin Hood Woods. Laszlo here is stating that LG Hollingsworth had a black a young black male who came over frequently. Interesting. As with many of the seemingly minor characters in the story, other parts of his story had disturbing contradictions. He stated that he heard about the murder on Thursday evening when he was discussing with Richard his traveling plans. Richard brought up the murder of the three boys. He remembered that on Friday morning, Richard took him to the airport for a flight he made to New Orleans. This contradicts with a profile of him in the May 20th West Memphis Evening Times. Benyo was out of town when he heard about the recent murder of the three young boys in Memphis. He said it made him very sad, and he hopes it is a rare crime. And I'm assuming that they investigated this Laszlo Benyo, this Hungarian architect, and that he wasn't actually a traveling serial killer. I mean, yeah, I don't know. This is weird. This is really weird. Do people think that Phillips, this minister, and Laszlo might have possibly been involved in some way? Because they're each other's alibis. They're connected to LG. I mean, this is weird. This is just really weird. Ongoing suspicions. On February 10th, 1994, the day after the preliminary hearing wherein it was revealed Damien Echols had named LG as someone who could have killed the children, the Memphis Commercial Appeal ran a story about him. The story, Inquiry Trials Haunt LG Hollingsworth, described him as a target of the investigation and included some of the allegations surrounding him. That night, LG called Domini to discuss this. The police taped the call. LG seemed to believe Jason was claiming he did it, but as had others, he had trouble recalling who Jason was. So this is from this call here. LG, my name's in the paper. Domini states, oh, really? About what? What's that guy with Damien? Michael or somebody. Jason, that's the name. Jason is trying to say I killed them kids? What? Now you know I didn't do it, don't you? Domini asks, little Jason? LG says, mm-hmm. Domini states, don't worry about it. So she doesn't state that she knows he didn't do it. She says, don't worry about it. This is from a transcription of the phone call February 10th, 1994. Again, LG asked Domini to confirm his innocence. Now you know I didn't do it, now don't you? Domini responds, I don't know. I ain't saying nothing. I don't know who did it. I don't have no idea what's going on or what. That's a curious conversation with these cousins. The allegations against LG continued. In March 94, with the Echols-Baldwin trial underway, LG sat in jail, charged with forgery and burglary. Fellow inmate Timothy Cotton said Hollingsworth had confessed to him, saying Damien and LG killed the children in retaliation against Mark Byers for a drug deal gone bad. The police dismissed Cotton's statement, saying he was looking for a deal. Commercial Appeal, July 17th, 1994. Yeah, that's interesting because you do have these people who are looking for deals, so they make up stories. On the other hand, there are real jailhouse stories that are overheard, confessions made, and they are real. So, it's again, let's try not to fall for any of these logical fallacies here. Alright, so let's get into this. Let's get into the Timothy Cotton account. So this is his actual handwritten statement here. His handwriting is really terrible here, but... So apparently he's saying that L.G. Hollingsworth told him that he was the fourth suspect in the 3 8-year-old killings on May of 93. he was getting coke from Mr. Byers. He said that it told me it was a drug deal went bad. March 4th, 1994. Strangers on bicycles. A stranger on a bicycle is a recurring theme in this case. The police questioned Mark Byers in a section referring to Mark Byers' search for the children in Robin Hood Woods on the night of the 5th. Detective Ridge, let me ask you something. Did you see a young white male riding a bicycle wearing a red shirt, bicycle with black like an all-terrain bicycle? Mark stated, I saw a guy that I had never seen in the neighborhood before that acted like he was helping us search. He was on one of the bigger bikes, kind of like a racing-size bike. You know, it wasn't a little bike, it was a full-size bike. Ridge asked, did it have mud grip tires on it? Mark replied, it seemed like it. It did have mud grip tires on it. He was slender and he had a real short hair and kind of a thin face. I don't remember if he had on a red shirt or anything, but I remember his face, though, because I thought, boy, it's just a real thin face, and his hair was really short, almost military short. It was real short. But he said, I've been riding my bicycle down there looking for y'all. He said, I'm helping y'all look, you know. I said, thank you, and we just kept on going. Okay, so apparently there's a stranger on a bicycle helping with the search now that this information hasn't been gone over before. Ridge stated, you remember anybody? He had a flat on his bicycle. He came back from across the pipe. Do you remember, were you there when somebody came back across the pipes with a flat tire? Mark stated, no, sir. This is the John Mark Byers police interview, May 19th, 1993. And so apparently there's another stranger who had a flat tire on a bike. So how many bicyclists were there? Although this individual is not identified in Byers' interview, it is possibly Timothy Cotton. What? So Timothy Cotton, well, hold on a second here. Hold on a second. So Timothy Cotton was an inmate, a fellow inmate of LG's in March 94. Now, according to this, Timothy Cotton was also in the woods that night? So, a May 27th tip from two women describes an encounter with Cotton that evening. Received a call from Sally Brady and Gina Riccio about that night that the boys were missing Wednesday night, and they were out driving around trying to assist in locating the missing boy. They advised that they saw Tim Cotton from Lakeshore riding a bicycle that was green and yellow go into Robin Hood Woods at the dead end of McCauley, and they were driving around Goodwin. About 45 minutes to an hour later, they saw him coming again from the other end of Robin Hood and was wet and muddy all over. And they heard him tell some of the search and rescue people he had fallen in the bayou and was going home to change clothes. They said he was a weird acting guy and just wanted to check him out. He was seen going to the woods around 10 p.m. and coming out around 11 p.m. Whoa, so this is truly mind-shocking information now. Wow. So two women, allegedly, so not one, but two women who were together, they corroborate each other's story. They're stating that they saw Tim Cotton, who's also from the neighborhood, coincidentally. And this is coincidentally the guy who is claiming that L.G. Hollingsworth admitted this to him. This is the guy, so apparently he went in with clean clothes, he came out with wet and muddy clothes. So theoretically, I guess you could say at night, hard to see, maybe he did really fall and he has nothing to do with the murders, or is this something far more nefarious? In the book Blood of Innocence, this encounter is moved to the next day, and now he is driving an all-terrain vehicle. Some of the additional information suggests the reporters interviewed Cotton. So, page 48, 26-year-old Tim Cotton was looking for a job at the Blue Beacon that morning when he was asked to join the search. Cotton went home and retrieved his four-wheel all-terrain vehicle and headed for Robin Hood, throttling down the mud-caked trails and boggy undergrowth. Near the east end of Robin Hood, two women watched as Cotton, covered in mud and water, emerged from the woods. He was a strange sight, the women thought. Pale blue eyes staring out behind the mud and funk that enveloped him. Cotton told the search and rescue workers he had fallen in the bayou and was going home to change clothes. The two women observers couldn't put their finger on it, but they thought there was something about Cotton that bothered them. They made a mental note. Meanwhile, Cotton was having strange thoughts of his own. He couldn't get over how the wooded area north of the pipe seemed to smell like blood. Cotton confirmed the job hunt and his search for the victims during a later interview. So this is summary notes, Lieutenant Sudbury in Durham, March 8, 1994. Timothy Cotton stated that around May the 5th or 6th, he had left his house on Wilson Street and was going to a job interview. Along the way, he learned of the 3 boys missing. That someone in the rescue squad asked him to help look for the boys, at which time he borrowed a 4-wheeler and helped look but did not find anything. And is there corroboration that he was asked to search? Did they locate the individual of the rescue squad who asked him to search? Or was anybody in the rescue squad, were they really just stopping random people and asking them to help search? Is that true? Is it a painful irony that he began looking for a job at virtually the discovery site and then went to search from there? Another tip was placed in Timothy Cotton's file and marked with his name. Reference Timothy Cotton, May 24th. F/W called, advised that the M/W first name, either Tim or Tom, is possibly responsible for the murder of the 3 8-year-old youths in Arkansas earlier this month. Caller advised that M/W is into self-mutilation and has broken bottles and cut himself in the presence of his sister. His sister advised the caller that her brother had killed animals before, and that when she heard about the boys, she suspected her brother's involvement. Suspect's sister's name is Tamara, and she works as a cocktail waitress at the Gulfstream Lounge. Caller stated that the reason she believes he's involved is he works at the Blue Beacon truck wash. The 3 youths were found behind the Blue Beacon. Caller advised that Tim had been in an institution and liked to play around with 5 to 8-year-old boys. What? What does that mean? So we have 2 individuals here, Tim Cotton and Damien Eccles, who were both in a mental institution. Timothy Cotton was among the first questioned. He was brought in May 8th, polygraphed, and released. His intake sheet described him as 5'11", 152 pounds, and brown-haired. He lived several doors down from the Byers around the corner on Wilson. He lived with James and Carolyn Birch, who were recent residents at the former residence of the suspect, Jerry Nearns. This house was vacant and is listed as part of the search on the day of discovery. Notes from Cotton's interview were not available in his folder. Somebody removed the notes? What? This is really weird. The story of Timothy Cotton did not end there. A year later in prison, he claimed to have a conversation with one of the confessed killers from the Memphis Commercial Appeal. Police received another tip March 8, 1994, that Byers' drug connections may have played a role in the murders. That day, a Crittenden County Jail inmate said L.G. Hollingsworth, also incarcerated at the jail on forgery and burglary charges, told him the murders happened as a result of a bad drug deal in which Hollingsworth had conspired against Byers. He told me that he and Damien made a deal just to get the Byers boy and hurt him real bad. Inmate Timothy Cotton, now 28, said in a written statement. The text of Cotton's handwritten letter is presented below. On February 28, 1994, L.G. Hollingsworth have told me, as Tim R. Cotton Sr., I state that L.G. has told me that he was the 4th suspect in the 3 or 8-year-old killings on or in May of 93. He was getting cook, came from, so it's C-O-O-K-E. This guy doesn't know how to spell coke. Came from Mr. Byers, and he, that is LG, told me that a drug went bad, and he, the 3 young men, to even with Mr. Byers. He put a hit on his family. He told me that he and Damien made a deal first to get the Byers boy and hurt him real bad. He went on for about a week telling me, Tim Cotton Sr., I wanted to know if he could trust me. I told him yes. He said that the 2 other boys were not part of the hit on the Byers family, but they were all together that day, and that there are 2 other people that helped the killers. That's pretty much all that I know that LG has told me for what I was put in PC March 4th, 1994. Cotton was interviewed on March 8th by Lieutenant Sudbury in Durham regarding his conversations with LG. Only summary notes are available. Additional details not included in his handwritten statement include LG went to cult meetings with Damien Eccles. An older man presided. LG had a knife that belongs to Eccles, and after the killing, so quote, after the killing, he had someone pick him up, and that person was driving a green and white van, and they lived in Lakeshore on the backside near the sewer plant, end quote. This is from March 8, 1994, interview notes. In summary, Cotton had a number of connections to the case. He was an employee at the Blue Beacon. He lived in the neighborhood of the victims. He says he was searching for the missing kids. He managed to get himself muddy and wet. He said it was because he went into a ditch or else the bayou. The police polygraphed him, took his fingerprints, and ran a check on him. He was arrested within a year after the murders for an unspecified crime. The crime was of sufficient severity that the police would state he was using his snitch status to get his sentence reduced. He was in contact in the jail at the time with L.G. Hollingsworth. He claimed that Hollingsworth confessed to the crime, also implicating Damien. Another tip said he liked to bicycle with young children, and that he was into self-mutilation and killed animals. Beyond that, there are several associations that are less clear. The above event where he got muddy may have happened between 10 and 11 p.m. on the night of the 5th, according to the woman in the police tip, or else the event took place the next morning, according to the Blood of Innocence book. He was bicycle. Also, the book might have gotten the details wrong because the police tip, I mean, you would think that police records would be more accurate than possibly editors or authors getting some details wrong in a book. He was bicycling when it happened, according to the women, or he was on a four-wheeler, according to Blood of Innocence. So here's the thing, though. Is it possible both are true? Did he go back the next morning also on the ATV? He stated he was north of the pipe, according to Blood of Innocence. He stated that he could smell blood in the area where the kids were found, according to Blood of Innocence. He stated he joined in the search because he was applying for a job at the Blue Beacon that morning, according to Blood of Innocence, and his own March 8th statement. So, I mean, what's the coincidence stack here? He's going to get a job right by where the bodies were recovered, and he happened to look in that exact area. And he happened to get muddy. And he happened to submit a tip regarding, and he was interviewed as a suspect, and he submitted a tip a year later. I mean, this is weird. So did he also go to these satanic meetings, and who else was at the meetings? Was this Hungarian architect and this minister whose house that L.G. Hollingsworth lived at? Are they part of that? I mean, how crazy is all this? Other bicyclists. Gary Ray Chadwick, a transient, was seen bicycling along the interstate at 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. on the 5th, and later at Lehigh, a town outside of West Memphis, at 10 to 10:30 a.m. on the 6th. He was the first of those polygraphed in regards to the murders. His arrest record was checked, and it returned with a long list of crimes for vagrancy, drunkenness, and petty theft. He was dismissed as a suspect. See, here's the thing. Like, we have all these people cycling around. How popular was this an area for bicyclists? Because if there's usually no adults bicycling around, then this is all strange. Now, if there's usually a dozen or so bicyclists on any given day, including transients, then okay, slightly less weird. Another blonde on a bicycle caught the interest of the police. On May 6, 1983, while in the area of Hamilton and Gaving, assisting in the search for the missing youths, I observed a white male riding on a chrome maroon bike, 26 inches, about 5'7" or 8, ruddy complexion, appeared to be a bit slow mentally. These are from the notes of Sergeant P. Hooper. So this is May 6th. Although this is a fair distance from the crime scene, Detective Ridge stated in a report that this individual was reported in the vicinity of the Mayfair apartments. He was identified by a West Memphis police officer as riding a bicycle in the area of Mayfair on May 6, 1993, while the search was being conducted for the victims. And this is from Ridge's investigative report. His intake sheet identified him as Daniel Wayne Leffler, age 32, blonde, 5'3", 140 pounds. His occupation is listed as mowing yards. Heavy for his height, Leffler is consistent with the Bailey notes above regarding a heavy-set individual on a bike who mowed yards. Leffler's interview notes are disjointed, referring to sodomy, dreams about his mother, and answers to 5 of the prepared interview questions. Who do you think did this and why? Like an animal truck driver. What? What should happen? Who did something like this? Should they have a second chance? His response is electric chair. How does being questioned make you feel? His response, done know nothing. Do you believe in white or black magic? Never heard of it. It would scare me. Are your parents alive? Long time ago. These notes are too brief to complete a picture of him. He passed the poly and was dismissed as a suspect with the same boilerplate caveat given to Timothy Cotton, unless further evidence is developed that would link him to the crime scene or the victim. I don't know. Cotton's got a lot of circumstantial evidence going against him. Truly, truly bizarre. Okay, let's circle back to Hollingsworth here. So, L.G. Hollingsworth Jr. died in an automobile accident October 26th, 2001, at the age of 25. Perhaps other more significant evidence will appear that ties LG to the murders. As of this writing, in the opinion of this author, LG is Damien Light, L-I-T-E. The most sensational evidence against him is unsubstantiated rumors and the overactive imagination of his aunt. This is not to say there is not possible troubling evidence. The jailhouse snitch who gave a scenario very different from that of the prosecution, the contradictory stories of his alibi, and the unresolved question of where he was on the night of the 5th, and his unexplained relationship with Richard Simpson. I mean, this Richard Simpson guy and this Hungarian architect, I mean, they just happen. It's just so weird. Like, they have this young criminal living at the house. I mean, it's just really weird. Who happens to be related to the girlfriend of Damien, who knows Damien, supposedly also goes to these satanic rituals. Yeah, this is really weird. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning here with these sightings. So, Narlene Hollingsworth, of course, not very credible, a lot of errors here. And of course, the other family members supposedly in her vehicle during a lot of these sightings, they were never even questioned regarding corroborating her sightings. So, moving on to Deborah Oettinger, 19 years old, also intersects with this case at several points. She helped in the search on the morning of the 6th of May. On the 1st of June, she gave a statement to police about rumors of cult rituals taking place in the nearby woods. Her 14-year-old brother also reported these. So to all the people that say there were no cult rituals, I mean, there's insiders here. This is not made up by the news. These are people giving statements to police. These are locals giving statements to police here. These are in police records. So, again, a lot of these coincidence theorists who deny that there's any occult rituals, that there's no Satanism going on, and this is nonsense satanic panic made up by the news, it's kind of weird. There's clearly evidence here and testimony regarding these rituals. Not to mention, you know, a lot of these rituals obviously do take place in many places. I mean, I know people who were involved with, who had brothers or sisters who did some kind of animal rituals. Like, this was decades ago. This was in the 90s somewhere. And they've given me secondhand accounts of this going on in the United States. So hopefully it would, I mean, not hopefully, I mean, obviously you don't want animals being killed either, but obviously not humans. But in terms of animal sacrifice, I mean, this was going on. Animal sacrifices and occult rituals were going on. This is well known. So if they were also going on here, clearly they could be some kind of satanic occult connection. So her 14-year-old brother also reported these. At the end of June, she made a statement recounting having seen the children the afternoon of the 5th, one of the last to have seen the children alive. Her house is located about 2 block lengths from the entrance to Robin Hood Woods, but still a quarter mile from the woods where the children were found. Huh. Oettinger made one police statement and testified in both trials. On June 30th, 1993, Mrs. Oettinger provided a one-page handwriting statement to the detectives. In this statement, she wrote that she saw the 3 children in front of her yard around 5:30 p.m. She wrote that her husband got home at 5:40 and also saw the kids. No statement was taken from the husband. She recounted telling the children to get off her lawn. That's a little cliche. Why were they randomly on her lawn, though? By the time she left for a dinner appointment at 6, she wrote the children had gone into the woods. This is probably only a presumption, as she did not mention seeing them go into the woods. This statement is brief. More details about this incident were brought out at trial. At the Miss Kelly trial, Oettinger said she saw the children in her yard around 6, close to 6. She saw 2 children, one on a bicycle, pass, then one more on foot. At the trial, she said she did not know the kids, but was able to identify them later. Subsequently, in her testimony, she stated that she knew Chris Byers because his brother had asked to mow her lawn last summer. How this helped her know Chris Byers was not elucidated. Yeah, that is kind of weird. So she would know the guy's brother, she would know the kid's brother, but yeah, that's weird. From the Miss Kelly trial, do you know the boys? Did you know them? Fogelman asks. Oettinger says, no, sir. Later, Fogelman says, were you later able to identify who the boys were? Oettinger says, yeah, I actually knew one of them because one of them's brothers had asked to mow my lawn earlier in the beginning, almost summertime. Do you know which of the boys that was? Byers, the little Byers boy. Now, it's unclear. I mean, if she was shown pictures after the fact, maybe that's how, and then she just connected the brother, whatever. At the Eccles Baldwin trial, she said she knew the children, that they were around her house quite a bit. Okay, that's a little weird. She added the details that she saw them for about a minute and that she had to wait for them to move to back out in her truck to leave. This conflicts with her previous statement that by the time she left, they had gone into the woods. Okay, this is a problem now. The woods are not visible from her driveway. Okay, that's another problem. This time she stated that she did not speak to them. What? Okay, so we have a whole lot of problems with her testimony as well here. She also said that they had met up and it had come from Goodwin's circle, meaning that she had either seen them before or else was adding in details outside of what she witnessed. From the Eccles Baldwin trial, Fogelman says, on what date did you, well, first of all, were you acquainted with any of the victims, Michael Moore, Stevie Branch, or Chris Byers? She responds, they were around the house quite a lot. Okay. I didn't quite know them real well. Okay, but you knew who they were when you saw them? I knew who they were, yes. So specifically when she saw them. So yeah, this is not a case of misinterpretation here. Later, Oettinger stated that two little boys cut across the yard and one they had met and they had went down to on Goodwin's circle. Okay, make of that what you will. Let's move on to Brian Woody, 20 years old. He said he saw the victims from his car as they entered the southern set of woods from the end of 14th Street between 6:30 and 6:45 p.m. His statements are significant for several reasons. Among those who testified at trial, his is the last sighting of the children. He also placed the children heading in the general direction of where they were found. Finally, with shades of Orson Welles, he insisted he saw a mysterious fourth child. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, this is just one of the most mind-shocking cases for just in its terms of its brutality and its tragic nature, but also the level of inconsistency, the endless list of suspects. I mean, this is all just very, very mind-shocking. Spotlight Woody Unplugged. Brian Woody gave 3 statements to the police and testified at trial. In one statement, he said he just got off work from Radio World at 6:15. In another statement, he said he just got off of work from Don's Super Shine at 6:30. The two establishments are connected. A summary of his testimony: he was heading down home when I approached 14th Street on Goodwin. I saw 4 kids go into Robin Hood. You know, right where the road ends. Furthermore, he stated he was traveling 40 miles per hour, then later amended this to 45 miles per hour on a residential street. He testified he saw these kids for about 5 seconds. He goes on to say all of them had their backs to me, so I couldn't identify what any of them looked like. I could not tell the ages of the individuals I saw. They were just young. He said that one had spiky hair, like in a picture of Steve Branch that he later saw. He said Steve Branch was carrying a skateboard. This might be fine, but from what he said, he would only have been able to see the children where he was crossing the intersection of 14th and Goodwin. Traveling at 40 to 45 miles per hour, his car would move 59 to 66 feet in 1 second. Heading to his home on Goodwin, he would have had to have seen these kids out of his driver's side window for a maximum of less than 1 second. And it would only be the maximum amount of time if for some reason he was speeding down Goodwin looking out his window. Right where the road ends is approximately 40 yards from the middle of Goodwin. He says he didn't know these kids at the time and that he only made the association with Stevie Branch from his spiky hair and having seen his picture in the paper. I mean, I guess more than, there could be more than one kid in the area who had spiky hair, of course. But he did say the one kid was carrying a skateboard, so that might match up. I mean, it is kind of weird, though. Strangely, he did not mention knowing Chris in spite of going to John Mark Byers' house to help in the search. His time of approximately 6:45 is 45 minutes later than the other sightings in the area. Less than 1 second from the back of kids he said he didn't know and had no reason at that moment to be concerned about from 40 yards distant while looking out of a window of a speeding car does not describe a firm observation. Many of these discrepancies went unchallenged in the trials. Woody gave his statement several times to the police, once in an undated report, once on May 28, 1993, and once on September 7th. Also on September 7th, the police re-interviewed Betty Lou Martins and her son, Robert Jeff Martins. In partial support of Woody's statement, they said they now remembered seeing 4 children, although in his initial statement, Robert said he saw 3. I mean, come on, man. This is getting weird. This is just getting too crazy. So let's get a little bit more into Brian Woody, also from jivepuppy.com. Brian Keith Woody, then 20 years old, said he saw 4 boys enter Robin Hood Woods while he was driving to his parents' home after getting off work at 6:30 p.m. on May 5th. His trial testimony was presented as the last time the victims were seen alive. For some details, he was clear. He said there were 4 children entering the woods. 2 had bicycles, 1 had a skateboard. 1 child had blonde spiky hair, and Woody said this is what caught his attention. At the time, the children entering the woods was unremarkable. He said he made the connection the next day. Woody stated this at the Eccles-Baldwin trial. I seen them because one of them had spiky hair, and my little boy, 2-year-old Ryan Woody, had spiked blonde hair just like it, you know? It just caught my eye. Fogelman states, all right, were you aware, did you know whether or not any of the little boys who were missing had that kind of haircut? Woody stated, well, not until the next day, May 6th at noon, when I went to my parents' house for lunch. My mom asked me, she said there are some kids missing, and I seen it, and I said, well, I think I seen them yesterday. I said that little spike-headed boy, he looked familiar. His statements and testimony are problematic. He only had a glimpse of the backs of the children. Woody stated, all of them had their backs to me, so I couldn't identify what any of them looked like. I could not tell the ages of the individuals I saw. They were just young. He could not identify whether the bicycles or clothing presented at trial were theirs. Price stated, did you have a chance to observe? I don't know if you did. There are 2 bicycles here that have already been introduced into evidence. One, this is a red bicycle. Do you recall if this is one of the bicycles? Woody stated, man, I couldn't tell ya. Price states, okay, and if I hold up the other bicycle, would you be able to tell? Probably not. They were, in the very front. Would it be fair to say that you did not know what they were wearing? I wasn't really paying attention. The event was unremarkable and at the same time unnoteworthy. Wadley asked, would you agree with me that it would be nothing unusual to see children coming in and out of that area? Woody responds, uh-huh. When he saw the children, he was speeding while making a curve through a residential area. Woody stated, yeah, I was doing about 45, I'm not gonna lie. This works out to be 65 feet per second. He testified he saw them for about 5 seconds, during which time he would have traveled more than the length of a football field. Wadley stated, Mr. Woody, how long did you have a chance to observe these 4 boys? About 5 seconds. That is kind of weird when you look at the photo here. So he was traveling east towards the bottom right, and he saw the kids. So if he was really going 45, there is a house in the way there. Unless they were closer, so he says he sees them going into the woods. How exactly into the woods? Because if they're a few dozen yards away from the entrance, but they're heading towards the entrance, he could have potentially seen them for longer. Okay. Woody claimed to have seen 4 children enter the woods. So if he's stating they're going directly into the woods, then yeah, that's problematic. The intersection would have only allowed for a brief space in which to see the children, assuming he wasn't looking out the side window while driving, allowing for a brief moment to catch the children in the corner of his eye, turn and look. He would have seen them less than 1 second and probably less than half a second. Woody claimed to have seen 4 children enter the woods. The presence of a 4th child contradicts most other accounts. He was never asked to identify the 4th child. Price. Okay, Mr. Woody, have you ever been asked to identify who the 4th individual was? Woody states, no. That's weird. So nobody even cared? That's so weird. Seeing the skateboard is a tantalizing detail, but also problematic. While Chris Byers was said to have skateboarded that day, if he did bring the skateboard into the woods, it was never found. Woody also stated at trial it was another child with a bicycle, not the child with blonde spiky hair. Steve Branch had recently received his bike as a present from his grandfather. So apparently Steve Branch was on a bike. He's stating that another guy... that's weird. While his tenuous sighting is unclear why the prosecution brought Woody in to testify at the Eccles Baldwin trial, he did not testify at the Miss Kelly trial. Possibly it was to establish Aaron Hutchinson as the fourth child. I mean, there's also quite a few houses right around there. I mean, you would think more people would have seen something. So here is a map depicting the last sightings of the children as presented in court. This includes Oettinger, Woody, Dana Moore, and Narlene Hollingsworth. And, you know, I'm assuming they would have done this, but it can't take that long to get around this little neighborhood on bikes. Yeah, I mean, it's problematic. Definitely problematic. Part 3, the door-to-doors and other neighborhood sightings. In the door-to-door interviews, over 30 sightings of the children were reported that afternoon. Most of these were unremarkable and early in the afternoon. Some were later but indefinite in description, saw them or saw some boys. There were, however, 6 sightings from those who identified the children by name. They tell an interesting and consistent story. All of the door-to-door interviews who identified the children by name and who saw them after 5:15 are listed below. Ben Crafton, 15 years old. On Wilson, he stated he saw Branch and Moore on bikes Wednesday, 6 p.m. going towards Goodwin. Kim Williams was with them. Like Kim Williams, he did not mention Chris Byers being with them. So he saw Branch and Moore and Kim Williams? Oh no, Kim Williams was with Ben Crafton. So both her and Ben Crafton stated that they saw Branch and Moore, but Byers was not with them at 6 p.m. now. Kim Williams said she saw Michael Moore and Steve Branch, but not Chris Byers, go into Robin Hood Woods between 5:30 and 6 p.m. Their bikes were left along Goodwin. She also said that she saw 3 older boys, 2 black and 1 white, later come out of Robin Hood. This is in agreement with Don Moore's statement. On a memo regarding her statement, the police give alternative theories. From Kim Williams' undated note, unknown who Kim saw, has been mentioned that during cult activities, some members blacken their faces. Also note victims had black boys that they also played with. This would suggest that the police considered the possibility that Kim Wilson and Don Moore saw the defendants wearing blackface and mistook them for being black. I mean, what about their arms? Like, are they wearing t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirts? Otto Bailey Jr. and Otto Allen Bailey III, 32 years old and approximately 10, 4th grade, at Weaver, and his father stated they saw Michael Moore and Steve Branch, but not Chris, as they left for softball practice at about 6 p.m. Otto Bailey Jr. was described as a suspect by a neighbor, and Otto Bailey Sr. was interviewed as a suspect. Lilia Bailey, the grandmother of Otto Allen Bailey III, also noted this sighting, although it is not clear whether she was passing along secondhand information. A possible discrepancy is the children were seen wearing backpacks. No backpacks were discovered with the children or described as missing. Okay, so let's examine the Baileys now. So Cat Street runs along the Robin Hood Hills. As presented in court, the children were last seen entering these woods. Although Brian Woody's testimony presented him as the last one to see the children, he was unfamiliar with the victims. In contrast, the Bailey family knew the victims. Their children also attended Weaver Elementary. 3 households of the Baileys lived next door to each other along Cat. So Otto Bailey Sr., 54 years old and 93, along with his wife Lilia. And next to them is Otto Bailey Jr., his wife Sheila, and their children. And then Otto Bailey III, called Alan, Fallon Bailey and Ashley Bailey. One more door over lived Brenda Webb, daughter of Otto Bailey Sr. She was in the hospital for a 2-week stay at the time of the murders. Otto Sr. and Jr. together owned a truck wash, Mr. Clean. Wow, so did everybody get all that? From the door-to-door notes, Lila Bailey stated, Wednesday, the victim stopped at her grandson's house between 3:30 and 6 p.m. Alan is a 4th grader at Weaver. Wow, so there's another stop here. Her grandson confirmed, said Michael said he had to hurry to leave and Steve wouldn't talk. At 5:45, both boys had backpacks green. Steve had with red shorts and with tennis shoes. They were going to pick up Chris. In another visit to this address in the door-to-door interviews, Otto Bailey Jr. didn't mention this encounter. He said, went to ball practice till 7:30. Taco Bell, 9 o'clock, didn't see anything strange. However, in a later interview, he gave more details. What's up with all these people and their own conflicting reports? On Wednesday, May 5th, 93 at 5:45 p.m., as my son and I were backing out of my driveway on the way to ball practice, we saw Stephen and Mike riding down the street right in front of my drive. My son hollered out the window at them to say hi. As I got to the back end of my drive, I stopped to see if any cars were coming. That's when I first noticed Stephen and Michael had backpacks on, riding their bikes towards Mayfair Apartments. I told Alan to tell them bye because we were going to be late to practice and had to get going. My son said bye, and I proceeded to drive on out and down the road, and that's the last we seen. And this was September 8th, 1993 that he gave this interview. Sheila Bailey, Otto Jr.'s wife, conveyed somewhat the same story to the West Memphis Evening Times. She identified one of the children passing by as Chris, although she may have been relating this story secondhand. So that's weird, because they mentioned only Steve and Mike. She's saying what? Nobody can get their story straight. Sheila Bailey said Christopher played on her t-ball team. He and one of the other boys were in her yard and riding their bikes around in the street out front shortly before her son went to practice Wednesday, Mrs. Bailey noted. This was in a May 7th, 1993 interview. At least one neighbor of the Baileys considered Otto Bailey Jr. a suspect. Mrs. Comer began talking about Otto Bailey Jr., who she says is the person she thinks committed the murders. She states that he has threatened to cut her son's penis off and stuff it up his ass. She stated that there are 3 suits against Otto Bailey filed by her and her husband. One is concerning an incident of threatening her husband with a handgun, one is for loss of business, and one is for terroristic threatening. She stated that she is aware of an abuse case and some type of drug cases. She further stated she believed Otto Bailey could have gotten the trust of the kids and would have been able to kill them after getting their trust. That's kind of weird, but Otto Bailey Jr. is with his own son. Mrs. Comer also made allegations against John Mark Byers, although those were not based on personal experiences. The police did not interview Otto Bailey Jr. as a suspect, but they did look into his father after receiving a tip. Otto Bailey Sr., May 12, 1993, received information from a female who advised that there is a person who lives across the street named Richard Strickler. They are big with CB radios. When they transmit on CBs, they broadcast over the telephones, radios, and television. She advised that on May 11th, 1993, her daughter overheard a conversation with a guy parked in a drive across the street. She thinks his name is Otto Bailey. She heard him over his CB talking to an unknown person. Quote, "I'm gonna kill your expletive ass like the 3 boys that were killed." Caller stated that she knows Otto Bailey lives on the street behind the location the boys were found. He drives a maroon van with a large antenna on it. That's disturbing. So this is reported May 12, 1993. Detective Birch interviewed Otto Bailey Sr., although dismissed his threats as being due to a big mouth. At 3 o'clock on Wednesday, the 26th of May, I met with Mr. Otto Bailey at my office here at the police station. Mr. Bailey was here not at my request, but from municipal court. The interview of Mr. Bailey was done without any problems. He answered all my questions and had nothing to add that was not already in the news or the papers. The day of the homicides, he was at work or home between 6 o'clock and dark. He will have to check for the time he left work. He stated he knew the boys from the area and had seen them riding their bikes on the street, but not that evening. He did not know the boys' names. Mr. Bailey is known to me as a big mouth on the CB radio and enjoys making other radio reporters or radio operators mad by trying to get their goat. He was shot by a trucker over a radio argument a year or so back. What? So these are interview notes, May 26, 1993. So apparently he likes to make crazy statements on the CB radio, one of which got him shot by a trucker. Okay, then, I mean, can this case get any more weird? Like, these are the people that live right next to where the bodies were found. After receiving tips from several children, about having been threatened by the driver of a white van, the police put together a list of all white vans registered in Crittenden County. A white van was registered under the name of Rex Hester. Also at Cat. This is the husband of Officer Diane Hester. Okay, alright. I mean, we're really getting into MINDSHOCK land here. So the husband of a police officer has a white van that several children called in or reported. I mean, it's unclear whether they reported this specific van, though. Did they report this plate, or was this just a white van? Otto Bailey Sr. had an extensive criminal record, carrying prohibited weapons, contributing to delinquency of a minor, possible controlled substance. That was back in 81. In 85, sale of a controlled substance, DWI. 1990, possession of a firearm. He plea bargained 1999, aggravated assault, possession of weapon. Got a suspended sentence of 36 months and $500 fine. So, ongoing list of offenses. Yeah, the Baileys seem to be an interesting bunch as well, living right next to Robin Hood. Okay, this is really weird. Let's continue on here, though. More sightings. Bobby Posey, 12 years old, on East Barton, stated that Chris Byers stopped by his house after his father whipped him. Chris stated he was running away from home. Okay, the plot's gonna thicken now. So Chris Byers' stepfather spanked him, whipped him, whatever. Now he's running away from home. Bobby Posey also stated that Mark Byers appeared and threatened to whip Chris again. No follow-up statement was taken from Posey. Okay, this might be the most mind-shocking ever. So this is a 12-year-old, not an 8-year-old. I mean, obviously not an adult, but this is a 12-year-old making this statement. So he also said... So Chris Byers stopped by, told him he was running away from home, and then presumably left. And then Mark Byers appeared at the Posey house and threatened to whip Chris again? Or was that while Chris was there? And what happened after that? Like, did they leave together? I mean, how can you just leave everybody hanging there? What's going on with Bobby Posey's testimony? I mean, I'm really interested with this Bobby Posey account. I mean, this seems to possibly be a smoking gun account here that could be a critical key to this case. Chris Wall, 19 years old, on East Barton, stated he saw Chris Byers 6:45 to 7 p.m. at East Barton and Macaulay with a blonde and a bike with a red spray paint heading towards Robin Hood. In a later statement, he said, at 7, I saw the Byers kid and the kid who lives across the street on the street near his brother's house going towards Robin Hood. Both were described as on bicycles. Chris Wall's brother lived on West Macaulay. West Macaulay intersected East Barton not far from Chris Wall's house. Chris Wall knew Chris Byers. He was named as a potential suspect, and in turn, he named Mark Byers as a potential suspect. So are these people just pointing the finger at each other just cuz? I mean, this is weird. A map with all of the sightings, 5:15 and after, is presented below. Included are sightings where the children were named along with the sightings presented in court. Some of the indefinite sightings, such as saw boys playing or 2 children, are probably spurious. I mean, it would also be curious, do we have information on what a typical day riding around on bikes looks like for these kids? Because to all the people that spotted them, were they asked, I mean, is this a typical Wednesday? Is this typical Tuesday, typical Monday, typical Thursday? Like, is this how it usually is? Because these are important questions. Part 4, analysis of the final sightings. The importance of understanding the last movements of the victims cannot be stressed enough. If the children were abducted, it can give the site of abduction. If the children disappeared into some neighbor's house, it could give the identity of the murderer. It can also help in defining whether the children were stalked and whether the murder was premeditated. How the children got to the place where the bodies were found is unclear. The sightings presented here only partly resolve the matter. The final sightings are a quarter mile or more away and pertain to a different set of woods. Even accepting the prosecution's theory, we only have the children were heading in a general direction. Why were they headed that way is unknown. The prosecution presented the murders as premeditated and planned, suggesting the children were meeting their murderers. Confounding the matter further, many of these reports have some problems, details that change over time, or those that are factually incorrect, such as the wrong number of bicycles. This may be due in part to misremembered details or misattributed times, other aspects of the vagaries of memory, or false sightings. Several of the witnesses elaborated their stories with unknowable details, including the intentions of the children or what happened after they were seen. There seems to be an inverse relationship between how well the children were known and whose statements was key to the prosecution's theory. Other than Dana Moore, all the others, 6 of them who saw the children and identified them by name, placed Michael Moore and Stevie Branch separate from Chris Byers. These statements reinforce one another. What should be the final judgment on these sightings? Do those with discrepancies represent the normal amount of inexactness to be expected by witnesses, or did at least some of these people not see the children at all? Did they confuse another set of children with these, or possibly a different day? Were some of these witnesses merely interested in the limelight of a famous case? I am inclined to go with the strength of the neighbors who identified the children by name and not by more tentative means, such as knowing the brother of a victim. A personal evaluation of the critical sightings. Included are those sightings of the children after they left their houses, if those sightings were presented in court, or if the witnesses identified the children by name. Dana Moore. Good. Although at a distance of over 100 yards, she knew the children and would certainly recognize her own son. This sighting is still distant from the woods. Deborah Oettinger. Fair. A little shaky on some of the details, including only seeing one bike and how well she knew the children. Her story changed over time and included details she couldn't know, such as them entering the woods. Unlike several of the other sightings, she says the children were near when she saw them. Narlene Hollingsworth. Poor. In other circumstances, her statement would probably have been ignored because of the inaccuracies and because it was not near the time or alleged place of disappearance. However, other parts of her testimony were critical for the prosecution's case. Brian Woody. Very poor. Nothing from his description of how he saw them makes it credible that he did see them or could identify them. Kim Williams. Good. Ben Crafton confirmed she was with them. There were other sightings of Michael Moore and Stevie Branch together, also supported by the statements of Don Moore. Ben Crafton. Good. Knew the children, supports Kim Williams' statements and those statements who saw Steve Branch and Michael Moore together without Chris, and those who saw Chris without the other 2. Another neighbor, Christy Blanchard, described 2 of the boys on bicycles and described their clothes correctly, supporting this sighting. Otto Bailey Jr. and Otto Allen Bailey III. Good. Supported by the statements of those who saw Steve Branch and Michael Moore together without Chris and those who saw Chris Byers without the other 2, supported by Lila Bailey. The presence of backpacks and different clothing is a problem. Chris Wall. Good. Knew Chris Byers, supported by Bobby Posey, who saw Chris Byers in this area. One difficulty is that his statement is ambiguous. And now let's dissect Chris Wall. Who did Chris Wall see? Chris Wall described seeing Chris Byers with a blonde, both on bicycles. Chris Wall knew Chris Byers, and according to information in a tip, he also knew the Hobbs' children. But who was the second one on a bike? According to the door-to-door notes from East Barton, 6:45 to 7, saw Chris on East Barton and McCully. Blonde with Chris, red bike, both spray on paint going towards Robin Hood. From the interview notes, at 7 p.m., I saw the buyer's kid and the kid who lives across the street on the street near his brother's house going towards Robin Hood, beginning to get dark. Also from the interview notes, Chris Wall stated, I got out about 6:45 p.m. or maybe 7 p.m. My dad picked me up and we went home. On the way, we saw the buyer's boy and one other boy. They were on bicycles in front of Mayfair on Barton. They were going towards Robin Hood Hills. This was echoed in a handwritten portion of the interview notes. Got out about 6:45 or 7. Dad picked up, went home, saw buyer's kid and one other kid on bicycles. They were on West McCully at Barton by Mayfair. They were going towards Robin Hood, starting to get dark. First, the notes unambiguously state that he saw Chris Byers and that both kids were on bikes. Was the second person Chris Wall saw Steve Branch? Chris Wall says the person was a blonde, but he probably knew Steve Branch since the tip against him came from Pamela Hobbs. Chris Wall lives on Goodwin, would have trusted him, wanted to babysit mother's younger 4-year-old daughter? What? Note, Wall lived on Barton near Weaver, not close to the intersection of Barton and Goodwill. This note was, however, included with Wall's file along with a police note, unknown caller who stated that Wall liked to hang around with younger kids. I mean, it really does seem like this would be a good opportunity for petty neighbors to kind of call in tips on each other, because that seems to be kind of what's going on. I mean, we've seen so many cases of this now, just going through all these people. They're just kind of, if they thought someone said something against them, they say something back just to say something back. Furthermore, the description of the bicycle's red bike, both spray on paint, Steve Branch's red bicycle was new, and the paint could hardly be mistaken as spray on. Okay, so it's not him? Does this statement help clarify who Wall saw? I saw the buyer's kid and the kid who lives across the street on the street near his brother's house. The kid who lived across the street could be interpreted as Michael Moore if he means across the street from Byers, but there is no way to mistake Moore as a blonde. Wall's brother Mark lived on West McCully, which is where Chris Wall says he saw Chris Byers. The above statement seems to say Wall saw Chris Byers with a blonde who lived across the street from Wall. Chris Byers being separate from the other victims is also supported by the witnesses who saw Michael Moore and Stevie Branch on Wilson, Goodwill, and Cat, by Bobby Posey, who saw Chris Byers near Chris Wall's house. So we do have clearly separate sightings here. Other sightings of a blonde on a bike. On McCully, Mayfair North, Ira Ingram saw one boy on a bicycle, blonde hair, between 11 and 11:30 Wednesday night. Heard noise and dogs were barking on a hill where they crossed at about 7:30. I mean, this isn't a child. Is this a child she saw? There's another sighting on Wilson Avenue, white male, mid-20s on a bike. Yesterday, May 6, 93, approximately 6 foot tall, slim build, sandy blonde, medium length hair, blue jeans, plaid shirt. Saw him about 3 different times, once walking, twice on a bike. Interesting. And once again, the Baileys. Otto Bailey and Sheila Bailey on Cat. Heavy set, 18 to 20-year-old, blonde hair, rode on a bike, older with a basket. What kind of guy would ride a bike with a basket? Seen at Cat cutting grass also. That these are specifically a blonde on a bike is interesting in its consistency. Beyond this, the individual is described as heavyset or slim build, mid-20s or 18 to 20. Perhaps there are 2 individuals being referred to, one or both unrelated to the crime. Okay, so yeah, I mean, this is truly bizarre. Let's go back to the witness statements being critiqued here. Bobby Posey, good. Knew Chris Byers. The information that Mark Byers had whipped Chris was not generally known that evening. Supported by Chris Wall and indirectly by those who saw only Stevie Branch and Michael Moore together. So, what was the last sighting of the children? The above is a somewhat simplified discussion of the last sightings of the children. In order to include only the most relevant sightings, I limited the sightings from the door-to-door surveys to those neighbors who identify the children by name. The above map also includes in gray other sightings. From the vague "saw some boys" to the more specific "I saw all three." Most of these sightings were not followed up on to determine whether the neighbor who sighted the children held a specific reason to know it was the victims and not other neighborhood children. There were other sightings, including ones that were potentially important. Jamie Johnson described seeing all three children that evening near the Mayfair apartments. An estimate on what time they were there or information on how he knew it was the victims was not presented in his interview. Some sightings are spurious. Sandra Nodini first described hearing the children cry for help near an entirely different bayou, and then in a later statement described seeing the convicted in that same area picking on one of the victims. The fact that the more specific and crucial information wasn't presented in her first statement, the fact that there are many others who placed the children elsewhere, and the fact that Nodini failed a polygraph are probably why she wasn't called as a witness. Cindy Rico offered a tantalizing tale of seeing the children near where the interstate crosses the bayou. This is in a seeming conflict in location and timing to when compared to other statements. There were other sightings far afield, some including a mile south on Broadway. Limiting the sightings to those who could identify the children helped eliminate some of the more unlikely claims. Furthermore, as can be seen with Deborah Oettinger's comments, the more times a story is repeated, the more it changes. In the above analysis, emphasis was given to the original stories of the witnesses. Taking the sightings literally and at face value, the children could be making loops and backtracking. Any final determination of where the children were last seen has to negate some of the sightings as spurious. While any individual sighting and time could not be taken with a sense of exactness, multiple sightings do tend to reinforce one another. There are multiple sightings of the children along Wilson, Goodwin, and into the Robin Hood Woods, and at the Bailey House along Cat. The large majority of these sightings had the children heading in the same general direction, north and to the west, in other words, in the direction of where they were eventually found, although still quite distant from the area. Most of these sightings were of Michael and Stevie alone. Using the progression of the children to the north and to the west, and allowing for inexactness in time, the last sighting would be that of Otto Bailey Jr. and his son in front of their house. They stated Stevie Branch and Michael Moore were headed along Cat in the direction of the Mayfair apartments. Also curious, if they're hanging out with multiple kids coming and going, and again, these are 8-year-olds here. Again, we're not talking older teens with exact plans or anything like that. They play with whoever's there. They see somebody, they might go to somebody's house, they might go to somebody else's house. Is it possible they rode around with another individual, and that's the fourth boy? And we are going to get into that in a moment. So, one more thing from JivePuppy.com here, an analysis of the door-to-door interviews. Chief Detective Gary Gitchell composed an 11-question survey and sent 9 officers out to canvass the neighborhood. The bottom of the survey read, "Make sure all this information is written down." This didn't happen. In order to analyze the door-to-door interviews, I divided up the canvassing into categories: total residences, houses listed as vacant, response categories: no answer, no information beyond the name of the resident, short answer, long answer, extended answer, or questionnaire. Notes on the analysis: total residences. The total residences were the total number of addresses listed in the door-to-door sheets. There are some houses in the area that are not included in this counting, i.e. some addresses were skipped over. For example, the address for Aaron Hutchinson's previous residence is not mentioned in the door-to-doors. It does not make the total list or the vacant list in this analysis. Other addresses which were skipped over were determined by comparing the door-to-door lists to the city directory. The reason some houses were skipped is unknown. They may also have been vacant. The skipped over houses were few in comparison to those with some notation. Residents listed as vacant. These are the only houses specifically listed by the officers as being vacant. There were 2 instances of houses listed as vacant on one visit by an officer and then had interviews with another officer. That's weird. These were not counted as vacant. Total houses minus vacant was used to calculate the percentage of responses. Responses. In general, residence was categorized by its maximal response. By this I mean if on occasion an officer made notes no info and another officer marked down a substantive response, that residency would be categorized by the longer response. No answer. A resident was counted as no answer if an officer put down no answer, NA, or only a house or apartment number and no further information, not even the name of the residence. No information. A resident was counted as no info if the officer put down no info, NI, or only the name of the resident. This was the most common response. Short answer. A resident was counted as a short answer if the additional information written by the officer could be summarized in a single sentence. Longer answer. A resident was counted as having given a longer answer if the additional information required more than one sentence to summarize, but it still was only several sentences. Extended answer. A residence was counted as giving an extended answer if the answer was more than a paragraph or equivalent in scope to that of the questionnaire. Questionnaire. A residence was counted in the questionnaire category if the questionnaire was filled out either formally or in a numbered format or the same info without the question numbers. So here's the door-to-door canvassing. On East Barton, 82. Wilson, 30. Holiday, 33. McCauley, 17. North 14th, 37. Goodwin, 43. Goodwin Circle, 20. Cat, 30. Proctor, 13. Little Elton, 11. Ferguson, 15. Roy Pugh, 15. Mayfair South, 80. Mayfair North, 100. Total, 526 door-to-door canvassing houses. Okay, the findings, a total of 526 residences were canvassed. This included 180 apartments in the Mayfair buildings and 346 houses. 11 residences were listed as vacant, 6 of these in Mayfair. This is probably an undercount, and other vacant residences were listed as no answer or not listed at all. A total of 124 residences were no answer. The police had no response lists, those houses that failed to answer with the initial pass. These doors were knocked on again, reducing the no answer rate. Other residences were only queried once. 164 residences were visited at least twice, usually because there was no answer the first time. Including all visits, 201 residences were listed as no answer. This number was reduced with repeat visiting. For 242 residences, no information was given. One reason could be because they had no information to add. However, this was not always the case. Often the amount of the information given depended on the officer. This can't be stressed enough. One officer would fill out a lot of information for a particular household, even info that was likely irrelevant. Another officer would give no info as the response to almost all houses visited. The problems with this approach becomes apparent when the same house was sampled more than once. Sometimes one officer would say no info or even vacant, and another officer could get a potentially vital bit of info or even fill out the entire questionnaire. On one pass, Danny Laird was listed as no info. On another, he cited Mark Byers as a suspect and passed on the info that Mark Byers desired to have Chris adopted. What? A potentially significant bit of info, whether it is correct or not. 68 houses gave brief answers and another 17 gave long answers. The questionnaire was filled out on 60 houses, just under a 12% rate. Another 4 residences had extended answers as long as what one might expect on the questionnaire. Probably related to the officer, but the best canvas street was Proctor, with questionnaires filled out for 10 out of 13 houses. Second was Ferguson with 11 out of 15. Worst was Mayfair North with 44 no answers and 43 no info out of 100 residences. Okay, so, we can't say no investigation was done. There clearly was some. But let's move on here to more mind-shocking information and revelations. So on the Oxygen Network, they did a West Memphis 3 show, The Forgotten West Memphis 3, which addressed some of these issues. So here is a post on Oxygen.com, March 28th, 2020. Who was the last person to see the West Memphis 3 victims alive? A witness named Carlos Seals said he saw the 3 8-year-old victims on the day they were murdered riding their bikes into the entrance of Robin Hood Hills by Gina Tron. Stevie Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore were only 8 years old when they were discovered dead in a West Memphis, Arkansas bayou in '93. While another trio of boys, teens, Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miss Kelly Jr., were later convicted of the murders. They were ultimately released from prison in 2011 after it became clear no physical evidence linked them to the boys' deaths. So who is responsible for the murders of Branch, Byers, and Moore? No one knows for sure, but the last person who saw the victims alive on May 5th, 1993 could possibly hold the key to unmasking the identity of the one who took their lives. The Forgotten West Memphis 3, streaming now on Oxygen, is trying to find justice for all the boys in this case. Part of that mission includes pinpointing who saw the boys last before their mysterious killer. Host and investigator Bob Ruff theorized this witness could be one of 2 people, Jamie Clark Ballard or Carlos Seals. Jamie Clark Ballard. Jamie Clark Ballard lived a couple doors down from the Branches family. She stated in a 2009 affidavit that she saw all three boys playing in her backyard the night they were murdered from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. At around 6:30 p.m., they sped off on their bikes, according to her affidavit. She declined to speak with Ruff for the show. I mean, there seems to be a lot of people who claim that the boys just randomly played in their yard. Like, how many yards did they randomly play in? Carlos Seals. Carlos Seals was a junior in high school at the time of the boys' murder. Police spoke to him during the initial canvassing efforts, but Ruff said that paperwork didn't note what he actually told them. Ruff tracked down Seals, who told him, "I think I may have been the last person to see them that day before, the incident." That's a weird way to phrase it. How about before the murders? Seals told Ruff that he saw Byers with his two friends on bikes at around 5:30 p.m. or 6 p.m. and that they were all carrying sleeping bags. Seals claimed the boys said they were going camping in the woods. If the sleeping bag detail is true, it's an element of the case that has never been reported before. All right, so a few issues here. So these are 8-year-olds. So 8-year-olds obviously have a different type of friendship than most adults anywhere, even teenagers. Like, if one of them is being beaten by his stepfather, he wants to run away from home, would they all agree to camp out in the woods as support for him as he was trying to figure out how he was trying to run away? Is that a possibility? Continuing on here, another witness, an associate of Seals. Okay, what does associate mean? Bobby Posey. So he was a junior in high school, but Posey's only 12, and yet they're associates. Told Ruff that Byers came to his home around 3:30 p.m. that day to tell him that his dad had whipped him and that he was going to run away. And if Bobby Posey is possibly involved in this, and maybe even Seals, would they make these stories up to cover for themselves? Ruff's analysis. Seals' timeline of events conflicts with Ballard's sighting. So Ruff tried to figure out which one he believed would be more credible. By speaking with Byers' brother, Ryan Clark, Ruff also learned of another possible discrepancy in Ballard's statement. On the day of the murders, Ballard said she walked home from school with Clark, but he told Ruff that was impossible because he went to court for an unrelated matter directly after school. Does this case have the most discrepancies, inaccuracies, and contradictions regarding witnesses than any other case ever? Ballard also claimed in her affidavit that she spoke to Clark about Byers' death at school the following day, which is a conversation Clark said never happened. In fact, Clark called her recollection false and dreamed up, claiming he did not go to school the next day. I mean, to be fair, Ballard, when was it? This affidavit was years later. I mean, could it have been a week later, 2 weeks later, whenever he returned to school? That, I don't know. I mean, think back to your school days, middle school, high school. Do you remember what happened which day? Because I remember various conversations, emotional, impactful conversations with various people. I definitely could not tell you the date they happened on, just that they happened. Because Clark's court appearance was corroborated by police records, Ruff thinks that Seals' account was the most accurate. Of all the people that I've spoken to throughout my investigation, I believe that Carlos Seals was the last credible witness to see the boys alive, he said. All right, so let's continue with the mind shock, the fourth boy. Now, this theory might, if true, it might actually explain a certain amount of contradictions and possibly even vindicate Narlene Hollingsworth, whom many consider not credible. So this is also from Oxygen, March 28, 2020. Who is George Taylor? The man who claims he was with the West Memphis 3 victims on the day of the murders. George Taylor said he was the fourth boy traveling with Stevie Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore before they were killed by Gina Tron. In 1993, 8-year-old Stevie Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore were discovered dead in a bayou in West Memphis, Arkansas, their bodies disturbingly mutilated. Teen outcasts Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miss Kelly Jr. were soon fingered for the killings. Investigators theorized that the boys had been slain in a satanic ritual led by supposed cult leader Eccles, and the 3 teens were later tried and convicted of the killings. And if I haven't stated this before, again, let's not fall for false dichotomy logical fallacies. Even if Damian Eccles, even if his friends and or associates are part of satanic cults and go to satanic cult meetings and have sacrificed animals before, that doesn't mean they're guilty here. Just keep that in mind. While incarcerated, the West Memphis Three maintained their innocence, and after multiple appeals, they were released from prison in 2011 by agreeing to an Alford plea. To this day, it is still unclear who is responsible for the brutal murders. In the hope of uncovering new information, investigator Bob Ruff re-examined the case in The Forgotten West Memphis Three, streaming now on Oxygen. While sifting through canvassing notes made by police at the time of the murders, Ruff discovered there may have been a fourth boy traveling with Branch Byers and more on the day they died. Also, let me interject here. Again, let's not fall for false dichotomies. Is it possible he was traveling with one or two of the boys, but not all three at different times? Because we do seem to have two different sets of sightings here. But continuing on here, in one interview, a West Memphis resident named Narlene Hollingsworth reported seeing three boys riding bikes, telling investigators that one of them rode out in front of her car and she almost hit him. She described one boy as heavyset and wearing shorts. None of the victims, however, were wearing shorts when they died, and none of them matched the physical description, leading Ruff to believe this heavyset boy was someone else. Not to mention, one of the three victims did have a skateboard. The fourth boy would have been hanging out with the victims shortly before their murders and could be a vital witness in this case. In a private group chat for Truth and Justice, a podcast created by Ruff, he asked his listeners about the potential of there being a fourth boy, and one sent him to screenshots of a post made by a man named George Taylor. Taylor had written a post on Facebook claiming to have been with the boys on the day of their deaths. He said he was with them all afternoon and had even gone with them into the wooded area known as Robin Hood Hills, where their bodies were eventually found. Ruff tracked down Taylor, and in an interview with the Forgotten West Memphis Three, he claimed the boys were his childhood best friends. While Taylor initially said he only briefly saw Branch on the day of the murders, he later claimed he was with Stevie, Christopher, and Michael. We got out of school, I went over to Stevie's house for a little while, then we decided to go and get our bikes, and then we met up with the other two boys later. Stevie went home for a little while. I can't remember how long it was, Taylor said. What? While Branch was back at his house, Taylor said he almost got hit by a car. He even remembered that he was wearing green shorts, which appeared to corroborate Hollingsworth's account. After the incident, Taylor said he went into the woods with the boys, but he left after a few minutes, noting that he didn't see anyone else in the area. I think it's possible that he did interact with Stevie, Michael, and Christopher that day, but he seems to be adding to the story, Ruff said. Details like the green shorts that are so specific. Who can remember a detail like that 26 years later? Ruff then took Taylor for a ride through West Memphis, and Taylor seemed to have trouble remembering key facts, such as the location of Branch's house and the pipe bridge used to enter Robin Hood Hills. Well, I mean, I don't know. Isn't it verified that this guy did live in the area and he was friends with them? So, I mean, is that verified? Because if it is, I mean, if he hasn't lived there for decades, I mean, perhaps he could have memory issues. It just doesn't add up. I don't think that the overwhelming majority of the story that he's telling is accurate, Ruff said. I think he got caught up in the drama and excitement of some of those online forums and took something that was maybe rooted in truth, and the story grew into something that wasn't true. Memories can be manipulated, and the media can play a role in that, such as the Forgotten West Memphis Three points out. Because so much time has passed, it's also difficult to remember the events that occurred in 1993, and we might never know what truly happened. Since the murders occurred nearly 3 decades ago, the case has received an exorbitant amount of attention, and several documentaries have chronicled the West Memphis Three's pleas of innocence, gaining the support of celebrities like Johnny Depp, Peter Jackson, and Eddie Vedder along the way. Due to all the attention and storytelling surrounding the case, it's possible that the buzz could have altered witnesses' memories, according to the Forgotten West Memphis Three. Here's the thing, though. So this appears to corroborate Hollingsworth's account of the boys she almost hit with the car. And also, not only that, but if Brian Woody's accounts of 4 boys entering the woods, if that's accurate, I mean, that's interesting. Also, we do have to keep in mind, it's possible there could have also been a 4th boy, but it wasn't George Taylor. There may have been another 1 or 2 boys who maybe could have hung out with them at various points in the afternoon. Again, it would help to have controls or a baseline here. On any given weekday, how many boys did they randomly hang out with? Was it common for them to hang out with other kids for part of the afternoon? They ride bikes, the other kid goes home, some of them go home, some of them don't go home.
Yeah, we need more controls and baselines here, but there's a lot of inaccuracy in this case. I guess we could close the podcast out with that. Obviously, plenty more to go over, plenty more suspects on the list, and we will do so in typical Mind Shock fashion. I hope you guys enjoyed another edition of Mind Shock True Crime in the West Memphis 3 series. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help us get more mind-shocking content out there and keep up awareness in cold cases, unsolved cases, missing persons cases, wrongful convictions, and more. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patreon to get a priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You can also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing out. Catch you guys next time.